Well, hello. So, the Shadow and Bone trilogy is written by Leigh Bardugo, and was published on June 5th, 2012 by Macmillan Publishers. Leigh then went on to write the next two books in the trilogy, Siege and Storm in 2013 and Ruin and Rising in 2015. She then expanded the universe with the duology Six of Crows in 2015 and The Crooked Kingdom in 2016. Following that, she wrote another duology, The King of Scars in 2019 and Rule of Wolves in 2021. There's also a standalone story collection called The Language of Thorns, the in-universe hagiography, The Lives of Saints, and the writer's introspective journal, The Severed Moon. According to Wikipedia, in September 2012, Holly Berrio, the president of DreamWorks Production at the time, announced that she had picked up the movie rights to Shadow and Bone. Then the guy who produced the Harry Potter films, David Heyman, he was announced as a producer, as well as a few other big producers at the time were being announced for this. Though, of course, this film never came to be because, as we now know, in January 2019, Netflix had picked up the TV rights for Shadow and Bone and ordered an 8-episode series based on the Grisha trilogy, Shadow and Bone, and the Six of Crows duology. They hired Eric Heisenauer as the showrunner, and production began in October 2019, with Season 1 airing on April 23rd, 2021, and Season 2 airing on March 16th, 2023. However, despite good reviews and viewership, such as myself, the show was officially canceled on November 15th, 2023, this was right after the SAG-AFTRA strike had ended. So for context of this video, I will be comparing the books very lightly to the TV show, but I'm not going to go over every single little comparison between the books and the TV show. So basically, if you've seen the show, you will know the differences. And if you have not seen the show, I will be pointing out some of the really major differences or just some of the differences or comparisons that I personally really liked and just wanted to talk about a little bit in some way. So yeah, don't get mad at me if I'm not going into every single little difference. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there that break down the differences between the book and the show. I would say a lot more in depth than what this video is going to be. I also want to note too that if I mispronounce words, my American English is my native language, and a lot of the words in this book are derived from Scandinavian languages. And I do not speak any Scandinavian languages, so I apologize in advance for mispronouncing probably a lot of words in this book. So I apologize. And also, this video would not be made if it were not for my best friend, Shannon. So thank you so much to Shannon for inspiring me to make this video, and hello to Shannon specifically. So, all right, lastly, before we get started, this book does have some mature themes throughout it, even though it is considered technically a YA book. But I do strongly recommend you look up the mature themes and trigger warnings of this book before watching this video, because I will cover the topics in this video as well as in future videos of this series. Technically, nothing explicit happens in the book itself, but there is going to be off-page assault of a minor that is going to be mentioned, and it is going to impact one of our characters. So, and in the entire series is going to be brought up. So please watch with your own discretion. Before. The servants called them Malachi, little ghosts, because they were the smallest and the youngest, and because they haunted the Duke's house like giggling phantoms, darting in and out of the rooms, hiding in cupboards to eavesdrop, sneaking into the kitchen to steal the last of the summer peaches. So our story begins in a country called Ravka, in a small village called Kremzin. And we are introduced to our two protagonists of the series. First up, we have Alina Starkov and then Malyan Orestev. They are two orphans brought to the Duke's estate in Kremzin, and after their parents had been killed, likely because of the war, and are watched over by Anya Kuya. Alright, so here we got Anya Kuya up here. We learned that Ravka is their home country and has been at war for hundreds of years. Literally hundreds and hundreds of years this country has been in war, and the war has orphaned many children and widowed many women. Alina and Mal, oh wait, I have to get my pointer. Alina and Mal are bullied harshly by the other kids, and they are constantly made to feel grateful for anything good in their lives. So they do have an education at this estate, but they're made to feel like you're lucky the Duke is letting you learn. You're lucky you get to learn to read and write in this estate. And they are also the youngest kids at this orphanage too, estimated to be around 8 years old. So I'm assuming the estate was probably at max capacity, I guess, if they were no longer taking in any more children or widows. And that is why they are now the youngest at this estate. So one day, the Grisha examiners come to test to see if either of them are Grisha. So now we're going to get into a little bit of world building time, because this is never technically explained in the books, I would say, at all. You sort of just learn this as you go, I would say. But this information is all information that all of the characters all already know and will discuss with each other as if it's just common knowledge. So in short, basically being Grisha means you have magical like powers. In the beginning of the book, there's this little chart that sort of breaks down who the Grisha are. So the Grisha are separated into 3 main categories or orders. First, you have the corporeal Kai, the ethereal Kai, and the material Kai. Then within each of the 3 orders, you are then categorized further into your specialty. So the corporeal Kai are known as the Order of the Living and the Dead. These are, you can be either a heartrender or a healer, and they can basically manipulate the body, such as like healing a cut in your hand or slowing down your heart rate. Then we have the ethereal Kai, which are known as the Order of the Summoners. These are the Squallers, the Inferni, and the Tidemakers. They are basically Avatar: The Last Airbender, but there are no Earthbenders. Leigh, why are there no Earthbenders in this world? Very curious to know about that. All right, and then we have the Material Kai, also known as the Order of the Fabricators. And these are our Durist and the Alchemy, and they can manipulate metals and chemicals. So the Grisha and Ravka are known as the Soldiers of the Second Army and the Masters of the Small Science. It's important to note that every Grisha and all of Ravka are automatically conscripted into the Second Army. And that is why the Grisha are here to test Alina and Mal. Because if you were Grisha, you will be taken to the Little Palace, which is actually just a gigantic palace. And you will be treated well with food and a better education. And you will also learn how to use your Grisha gifts, basically. So the Ravkan Grisha make up, again, that Second Army. But there's also the First Army. The First Army is the army of the non-Grisha, or just like the regular human beings. And they too serve the king and Ravka and are part of the ongoing war efforts. Now, Alina and Mal, they don't want to be separated. So if they are tested and one of them is Grisha, they could be separated. So now they're scared of being tested as well to see if they're Grisha. So these two, they pass each other a look. The Duke would have recognized that look. He had spent long years on ravaged northern borders where villagers were constantly under siege, and the peasants fought their battles with little aid from the king or anyone else. He had seen a woman, barefoot and unflinching in her doorway, face down a row of bayonets. He knew that look of a man defending his home with nothing but a rock in his hand. And that is the look our 2 8-year-olds just past each other, right? All right, so then we are going to get a 10-year time jump into the future, roughly 10 years or so. Alina and Mal have now both joined the First Army, and they were on their way with their regiments to Kribersk. I do have this little map. Honestly, you're not really going to be able to see it because I printed it kind of small. I probably should have maybe printed this a little bigger. I'm going to have to rearrange as we get more characters onto the board, but we'll see for now. Alina has joined the Cartographers unit and is training to be a map maker. And Mal, I guess, is just a regular soldier. Okay, technically he is a tracker, but at this time in the book it's not clearly stated that he's a tracker. So you're just assuming he is a regular soldier and she is a cartographer. So the regiments need to cross the Shadowfold while they will finish their training, and then I'm assuming they graduate, it doesn't necessarily say, and then they will return back to Kribersk. Alina has grown up to be quite quick-witted, and she often speaks before she thinks, if we're being really honest. So she doesn't seem to mind this, as she knows people will underestimate her because she's this skinny and scrappy girl, or at least that's how she's often described, as like this skinny, scrappy girl. We also get many hints and references that Alina does not sleep well at night. And nor does she have a very big appetite. She doesn't sleep well, she's not really eating, she's a skinny, scrappy girl. And I cannot review every single reference to Alina's malnourishment, if we're being honest, and poor sleep, because that honestly happens quite a bit throughout these beginning chapters. But there are quite a few, so just keep in mind, doesn't sleep well, doesn't eat well. Mal, on the other hand, has grown up to basically be best boy, right? He's best boy, everyone really loves him. He's extremely popular. He's outperformed in every way in the First Army. He's good looking. Everyone loves him. And at first, Alina was excited to be making new friends in the First Army until she kind of realized that they all just wanted to like be close to her because of Mal, right? Everyone just wanted to be like her friend because they thought Mal was really cool and they knew that they were friends as well. So it does kind of hurt her feelings that no one actually really cares about her and wants to be her friend. So as they are marching, Mal comes over because he can see how nervous Alina is about crossing the Shadowfold. And he comes over to kind of tease her, breaks the mood a little bit humorous. And even though Alina acts annoyed at Mal's teasing, she also notes, I felt my mood lifting all the same despite my best efforts. Mal still had that effect on me. So it's very clear that Alina has unrequited feelings for Mal. Let me grab a little pointer again. Unrequited feelings. So Alina has always seen Mal as more than a friend, and it's also clear that Mal only sees Alina as a friend. Like, even though he clearly loves her as a friend, he only sees her though as a friend, like nothing really more. Which does hurt Alina, but she is okay with it because she's kind of like, I want Mal in my life. He's my best friend. So I will take whatever I can get from him, even if that's just friendship, right? She's like, I can live with that. Totally fine. As they are marching towards the shadow fold, I feel like everyone's crooked on the board right now, but I don't know how to fix that. So sorry if it's a little crooked. I'm trying my best. Sorry. So as they're marching towards the shadow fold, we get some more world building that I'm just going to kind of info dump right now. The shadow fold is a swath of nearly impenetrable darkness that grows each year and is filled with these horrific creatures. And this show is literally portrayed as a gigantic wall of darkness. Like if you think of the wall in Game of Thrones, basically that, but it's black and like made of shadows. So in the book, it's also called the Unsea and is also referred to as a desert since there's no plants grow, there's no sunlight, and no one knows what happened to all the people who used to live in the like, you know, there used to be villages where the Shadowfold is. No one knows what happened to the people or the villagers from the Shadowfold either. So just gonna point that out. All right, so the Shadowfold as well splits Ravka into two, as we can kind of see a little bit on that map there. This creates a West Ravka and then the Old Country. So West Ravka is like a little bit smaller than the Old Country, as they call it, and then the Shadowfold is in the middle. It also cuts off the main part of Ravka from what they call the True Sea, which is like, you know, the actual ocean, so to speak. And that is something that Alina is kind of looking forward to seeing because she's never seen the True Sea, of course. So she's like, wow, that'd be really cool to see the True Sea. Looking forward to that, even though I'm scared of the Shadowfold. It is incredibly dangerous to cross the fold as the Volcra are extremely dangerous. This is taken from the book, but the Volcra are these large monster-like creatures. They have these long claws, these leathery like wings, and sharp teeth as well. They are blind from generations of living in the Shadowfold in itself, but they do have a very strong sense of smell, according to the book. And in the show, they don't even have eyes. Like they no eyes, right? You don't need eyes when you're in the Shadowfold. So Alina shares this apprehension with crossing the fold, and again, the Volcra with Mal. But again, Mal doesn't seem as nervous about crossing the fold. He actually, again, he's trying to joke around with her, trying to make a little bit light of the situation, mainly just to make her feel better because he knows that she's really nervous, she's really scared. So suddenly, out of nowhere, a black carriage almost runs Alina over, and then Mal has to pull her back into his arms so she doesn't get literally run over by this black carriage. And Alina is kind of caught between the thought of like, wow, I just almost got run over by this carriage, but also the idea of like, wow, like Mal is holding me, so I'm like blushing a little bit. So she realizes it's like a little bit silly, but she can't help but, you know, the two can exist at one time, right? So, all right, so following the black carriage is a blue carriage, and in the blue carriage is a beautiful black-haired girl who kind of has eyes for Mal. Like she's riding past and she's sort of checking out Mal. So Mikhail and Dubrov come over and they start hollering at Mal being like, did you see that gorgeous Grisha girl like checking you out, right? So here we have Mikhail and Dubrov. Also, I don't know why their photos printed so dark. I tried. Trust me when I say I tried really hard, it was difficult, right? So and they are basically Mal's like best guy friends. Like again, like Alina's his best friend, like his best mate from childhood. But again, he has his guy friends too. Alina has no interest now in hearing of their endeavors to try to swoon over these Grisha girls. So she makes her way over to the documents tent. So remember, our girl is a cartographer. So she is required to create 2 drawings in a day, but she hasn't even started on her first one. So her senior cartographer is a little bit disappointed, a little bit to his dismay, but her friend Alexei gives her one of his drawings in exchange for her describing what the Grisha carriages looked like, right? So here we have Alexei, her little buddy, who's also a cartographer as well. It is clear that Alexei is fascinated with the Grisha, and he's very excited to be among them. And we sort of see a split here of people, right? People who are interested in the Grisha and people who see them not necessarily as like a burden, but they don't think the Grisha should be held in such high regard, right? Because in Ravka, because again, they're all in the first army, these guys, and the Grisha are the second army. And so sort of told as like, oh, the Grisha with their Grisha powers is like better than them a little bit. But again, like not necessarily better than them, but they have different skill sets that these guys can never comprehend. Because in theory, a Grisha could do what the first army does, right? They were going to learn like hand-to-hand combat, they can learn to shoot a gun, things like that. But they can't do what the Grisha do. They don't have those like magical like powers. So again, a little bit of a split of how people see the Grisha. So I will also want to note that Alina and Alexei's friendship is really cute in this scene, and I just really like the two of them together. It's really fun. We get a little more world building as Alina and Alexei and the other junior cartographers work on their sketches. The Shadowfold was created by the Darkling hundreds of years ago. Shadowfold created by the Darkling. And the current Darkling is the general of the Second Army, and he leads the Grisha army. And while the Darkling who created the Shadowfold was said to be completely mad, the current Darkling is trying to atone for his ancestors' sins, is what we're being told and what people believe. Later that night, Mal comes over to Alina's tent, and there's a little line here that's very clear that Alexei has a crush on Mal. That's why I said, like, even though Alina's friends with Alexei, she kind of knows Alexei is really only friendly towards her because, again, he very clearly has a little crush on Mal, as does everyone, it feels like, has a crush on Mal, for being quite honest. So Alina tries to swallow her jealousy because she knows Mal and his friends were looking to talk with the other Grisha girls that night. That Mal doesn't know how she feels, so she's kind of like, what's she to do? So Mal actually came over to her tent because he noticed at dinner that Alina was looking especially sad and kind of quiet during dinner. So in the TV show, Alina actually doesn't get served dinner because she looks like she's from Shuhan, which is basically Leigh's fictional world version of looking East Asian. And in the books, the racism against Shuhan isn't as prevalent, I would say. It is mentioned, but the outright microaggressions and racism that Alina faces in the show aren't as strong in the book. But I do like that they brought this layer because I think it shows that much more struggle for Alina. So again, she has a lot of struggles going on, and racism, unfortunately, is one of the struggles that she's going to be facing in the show. So again, Mal has come over to try to make Alina feel better and braver about crossing the fold the next day. They reminisce a little bit about being in the orphanage, which Alina notes is strange for Mal because normally he doesn't like to talk about their time in the orphanage. He kind of likes to pretend, that time didn't exist. Mal tries to assure her that at this time tomorrow, they'll be in Oskurvo, so again, across from the Shadowfold, looking at the ocean and drinking kvass, which is kind of like beer, essentially, in their world, is what it seems like. Alina asks, is Dubrov buying? Just you and me, Mal said. Really? It's always just been you and me, Alina. What was that supposed to mean, Mal? What is that supposed to mean, Malian? For a moment, Alina feels like that could be true, but then Mikhail and Dubrov come over and they kind of call on him to go on their little flirtation tryst, as you may. And Alina still feels a little jealous and sad, but she recognizes that maybe the two of them are just on different life paths, and maybe that's okay, right? Sometimes you do grow apart from your childhood best friend, and she's like, perhaps that's what's happening, and perhaps I have to come to terms with that. All right, buckle up, because we are the next morning and we are entering the Shadowfold. That's right. So they cross the Shadowfold on sand skiffs, which are shallow sleds rigged with enormous sails that let them skate almost soundlessly over the dead gray sand of the unsea. And the Grisha squallers airbend the air into the sails to make them move along. They are all given very, very specific orders of where to stand on the skiff. And Alina is gripping the rails like her life depends on it, right? Because she is very scared to be in the Shadowfold. She describes it like drifting into a thick cloud of smoke, with sounds dampening and the world feeling eerily still. Very quickly, the Volcra descend on them. They're only in the fold for like a few minutes, it seems like, and very quickly, suddenly, the Volcra are upon them. The skiff is in this sudden chaos. The Volcra are swarming around them everywhere. Soldiers are shooting, the Grisha are trying to fight them off. Alexei is dragged over the edge of the skiff, and while Alina is trying to hold on to him desperately, he's quickly taken away, and his screams are fading into the chaos around them. We're gonna put a little X on Alexei because he will not be coming back. Sorry to Alexei. Alina looks over and sees Mal is fighting off Volcra too, but he doesn't have enough time to try and reload his gun. So she just rushes over to him, girl, not even thinking at all. She's like, my best if is in trouble, I'm going to go save him. Rushes over to him and she stabs the Volcra with her knife, but she is too late because Mal is already falling to the ground injured. She covers his body with his own and is just completely devastated, right? Her best friend. Mal kind of whispers in her ear, I'll meet you in the meadow, which is from when they're at the orphanage. They had this special meadow that they would go to together. And when she hears that from him, she just loses it. Girl loses it. Something inside me gave way, fury and hopelessness and the certainty of my own death. A Volcra swoops down and digs its talons into her shoulder, and as the pain shoots through her body, the entire world just goes white. She feels the Volcra release her and it drops her onto the deck, where suddenly she just feels nothing at all. So when she wakes up and she comes to, she realizes a few things all at once. First, they're no longer in the Shadowfold because the sun is shining. Second, her shoulder is in pain, but there is a Grisha healer tending to her shoulder. And third, she's like, where's Mal, right? It's like she wakes up and she's like, where's Mal? Where is my best friend? Where is the person that, that almost just died in the Shadowfold? And also, she's like, why is someone pointing a rifle at me? So Alina is marched back through Kribursk. We didn't even make it across the Shadowfold. Again, we're only a little bit into the Shadowfold. We're still in Kribursk. So as she marked through Kribursk at gunpoint with the Grisha heart rendered to the colonel's tent. Colonel Rofsky, which he doesn't get a photo because he's only going to be in this one scene. So Colonel Rofsky looks at Alina and he asks her, what are you? Alina innocently says that she is a map maker, right? She's like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. And the colonel immediately has her marched over to the Darkling's Grisha tent. So in the TV show, it is going to be the Darkling who asks Alina the like, what are you question? But here it is the colonel who does it. So Alina is both fascinated by the luxurious Grisha tent, but is also weary because all the Grisha are just kind of staring at her, being like, what is going on here, right? Everyone knows that something major just happened. What just happened, right? Most of the Grisha are kind of snickering at her, but she holds her head high because, again, girl, she has been bullied her whole life, right? In the orphanage, and then not really bullied in the First Army, but again, just kind of ignored in the First Army. So she's kind of thinking to herself, there's nothing that these people can say that, you know, that she hasn't already endured. But when she sees the Darkling, she is a little bit taken aback. All right, we scooted some people around so we could fit the Darkling here officially. He's much younger than she expected him to be, though she does remember that very powerful Grisha will live very long lives. So in the book, the Darkling is described to be in his early to mid-20s. And remember, Alina and Mal are around 18 years old at this point in the book, so it is a true YA series in that point. In the TV show, everyone got aged up a little bit. So Ben Barnes, who plays the Darkling in the TV show, he was in his late 30s, early 40s when they were filming, and the cast themselves were all kind of in like their early to late 20s, I would say. The age difference between Alina and the Darkling in the show is a little bit more, about 10 to 20 years. Whereas in the book, it's supposed to be more like 5 to 7 years, I would say. So, all right, so one of the captains starts giving the report that 30 minutes into the journey, they were attacked by the Volcra. And as they were being overrun by them, he suddenly saw a blaze of light, bright as noon, like staring into the sun. The Darkling asks, and the girl? And Alina's like, is he referring to me? Like, what is that? What is that man talking about, right? Alina's senior cartographer describes the scene in a little bit more depth and how when Alina saw Mal in danger, she rushed over to him and then just lit up, right? Lit up like a beacon out of nowhere. Everyone is in all of this, and some are confirming it, like the people who are on the skiff were like, yep, that's what I saw. That was crazy. While others, like this black-haired Grisha girl, the one that was kind of checking out Mal the day before, is like, this is absurd. Do you really think we just happened upon a sun summoner? Mal is then brought in, and even though Alina is relieved to see that he's okay, she's also like, he needs to be in a medical tent. Like, clearly he's still very injured from what happened in the Shadowfold from the Volcra. And Mal is confused because he doesn't remember the shining light at all, but he's also like, Alina's not Grisha. We grew up together, right? He's like, I would know if she was Grisha. It's like, I've known her my whole life type of thing. But the Darkling just kind of responds back, you know, we all have secrets. And this visibly annoys Mal. He's like, Alina doesn't keep secrets from me, right? So Alina tells him that there has been some kind of mistake. She's like, this is impossible. She's like, I am not Grisha. I'm just a map maker. Girl is convinced. She is just a map maker. She is just a cartographer. So the Darkling decides to test Alina. He takes her arm, and Alina surprisingly does feel this call in her. Something in her trying to rise up to an answer. But she pushes it down. Like the true, person, you just squash those feelings down and just ignore them. She tells herself that there is nothing there. Nothing at all. Just leave it be. There is no anything inside of her. But then the Darkling, he quickly then pricks her arm, just like a little prick in her arm. And through the quick pain and fear, the thing inside Alina rushes up to the surface, and she can't help but answer the Darkling's call. And the world just explodes in this blazing white light. Literally everyone now is in awe. Even the Darkling. Even the Darkling's like, oh my goodness, like there is light everywhere. But he does make this rude comment to her, being like, I suppose you only look like a mouse, which is pretty rude of him to say to her. So the Darkling calls for Ivan, who is a heartrender, to take her away and see that a healer tends to her. Ivan is a bit rough with Alina, kind of like, pushing her around a little bit. And the Darkling reminds him that she's Grisha now. It's like, you better treat her well. And Alina is still shouting that there has to be some kind of mistake. She's like, this is a mistake. I am not Grisha. And as she's being taken away, she sees Mal is just getting swallowed up by the crowd, and she doesn't even get to say goodbye or anything to him. So Ivan takes Alina to the Darkling's black carriage, again, that one that almost ran her over the day before. And all the while, Alina is just insisting that there has to be some kind of mistake, because there's no way she's Grisha. She's just a normal girl. She's just a regular girl. And remember, she's just this skinny, scrawny orphan from Karemzen. There's no way she's Grisha, let alone a sun summoner. So Ivan forces her into the carriage, reminding her that she is in danger now. In a few hours' time, every Fjordan spy and Shuhan assassin will know what happened on the fold, and they'll be coming for you. Our only chance is to get you to Os Ulta and behind the palace walls before anyone realizes what you are. And this is one of the first actual in-book instances we hear of who the Fjorden and the Shuhan are. So once in the carriage, Alina is seen by a Grisha healer, and they basically heal all her wounds. She's a bit nervous because she's never been healed by a Grisha before, and while it tingles a little bit, she is surprised at how quickly and painless it really is to be healed by a Grisha. So when the healer is finished, Ivan commands the healer to give Alina her kefta. So the healer is going to give her kefta to Alina. The healer is clearly very upset to part with her kefta, but she follows the command. And Alina notes that the kefta is warm and soft, and Ivan informs Alina that keftas are made with a material kai core cloth, which basically means that is bulletproof. And Alina's like, what? Like, bulletproof? What are you talking about? How come the first army isn't giving this material? Or maybe just the officers are? But she can't really come to terms with this anyway, because before she knows it, the healer gives her kefta, and the healer, I kid you not, just tucks and rolls out of the moving carriage. Just so quite, I think this is what happens in the TV show too, but it's quite funny that she's just like, all right, yeets. Alina rides in the carriage and is still convinced that there has been some kind of mistake, of course. She notices that Ivan and the other Grisha that's in the carriage with her are sort of eyeing her up, and she snaps at them for staring at her. And this is where I want to note her character is very interesting here in the sense that there is kind of these two sides to Alina, right? She's very multifaceted, but she sort of has this low self-esteem aside where she doesn't see herself as anything meaningful or useful. And again, she's just orphaned from Karamzin. She can't imagine anyone else seeing her as anything more than, again, just this lowly little girl. But then at the same time, if anyone challenges her, she isn't afraid to stick up for herself, and she often will snap it back, especially verbally to other people. Again, we saw that in the beginning of the book. We're seeing it again here now. We will see it more to come as well too. So again, she sort of had these two sides to her personality here. So the other Grisha in the character introduces himself as Fedior, and Fedior is also a heartrender in the Darkling's service. All right, so there we got Fedior up on the board. And Fedior also gives us a little bit more of world building as to why the Sun Summoner is important in a more general sense. So he says that the Shadowfold has made Ravka weak. Again, it splits the country into two sections. And more importantly than splitting them into two, it means that they're shutting Ravka off from trade ports, from communications from the other side of the country, from other international countries. And it's just making communications and everything harder for Ravka. And the Sun Summoner is believed to lift the Shadowfold and rid Ravka of the Shadowfold, therefore restoring the country's strength and health. So though of course the Ravkan enemies of the Fjordans who live north of Ravka and Shuhan who live south of Ravka don't want that to happen, right? Because they are at war with Ravka, so they would prefer Ravka stays weak. So it is in their enemies' best interest, the Fjordan and the Shuhan, for Ravka to actually keep the Shadowfold so that way it continues to weaken them. So then they have like the upper hand. So in that sense, it is then in their best interest to eliminate the Sun Summoner, right? They do not want the Shadowfold to disappear. And if she's able to make the Shadowfold disappear, they want the upper hand in this war that's going on. So now, does this make sense? I guess, sure. I feel like it's a far stretch to go that one, that the Sun Summoner exists, and two, that he or she must be eliminated immediately. But anywho, the plot must go forward, and that is why they would want to eliminate her. Again, I don't know if I'm fully sold on that, but anywho. Ivan is more interested in how Alina did not know she was Grisha. Remember in the prologue of the book, way back when the Grisha came to test them at the orphanage. Alina keeps insisting on the mistake and that when the Darkling touched her, he must have done something to her. But Ivan explains what an amplifier is. Basically, a Grisha can kill a powerful animal, and when they wear that animal's bones as like a necklace or something like that, their bones will act as an amplifier, increasing the Grisha's power. But he says you must already have the power within you for that to be amplified. The Darkling is a living amplifier, which is just one of his many gifts and powers because he's very powerful. That is why Alina felt that call when he touched her, right? When he grabbed her arm, is that she could feel that call within her. That was him as the amplifier pulling that call out of her. And that is also why she had no choice but to stop it too, because he's a very powerful amplifier. Honestly, even the fact she was able to resist him a little bit at first just shows her future power. Because again, it wasn't until he actually pricked her, you know, the sharpness of the pain, that actually she was forced to let that power come forward. But even just by touching her, technically, you know, he could have called that power from within her. Ivan asks Alina who Mal is, and she realizes she she's probably talking in her sleep, right? She doesn't really want to admit who Mao really is to her, so she just says that he is a friend who saved her life. And she's very earnest when she says that. He's like, he saved my life. And Fedior is like, well, you also saved his life, plus many others on the skiff. It's like, you've saved lives too. And he really nails home that it's a big deal to save someone's life. But Alina just immediately thinks of Alexei, right? She's like, I didn't save Alexei. I didn't save my one possible friend from the cartographer's unit. He's gone for good. I want to note too that in the show, Alexei had a little bit more of a plot, but in the books, he does not have that extra plot. So maybe we could pretend that happens and he maybe survived to Kirch, but again, in the books, that's not canon. All right, so a little bit more of world building here, but Alina asks Fedior why he didn't become why he became a heartrender instead of a healer. And Fedior explains that out of all the Grisha, the Corporal Kai have the hardest training, the most rigorous training. They have to train and study longer because I guess before they can finish school and, before they graduate and stuff like that. And heartrenders are trained, these two are trained as soldiers, whereas healers are trained to heal. And in future books, we will get a little bit more in depth of the differences between what they do. But in theory, I would say heartrenders and healers have the same powers, so to speak, but they just use their powers slightly differently. So again, sort of like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, where waterbenders, they can fight with water, but they can also heal with water. Kind of similar to that. They can technically do the same things. It just kind of depends on how they're trained and how to use their gifts. So we'll explore that a little bit more in future books. Suddenly, the carriage comes to a stop. A tree is blocking their path. Fedior is like, no worries, we'll just clear that tree. Before he basically even finishes that sentence, they are immediately under attack. Immediately, they are under attack, and I kid you not, that guy said, this may be a trap, and then he's literally shot in the same sentence. Like, they're not Fedior, a different soldier who's like outside the carriage is telling Fedior, Ivan, and Alina that, shot in the same sentence of saying, like, this may be a trap. So an intense fight scene ensues. Alina is told to stay in the carriage as she hears gunshots and shouting, and then this yellow-eyed Fjordan gets to her and starts dragging her out of the carriage. In the show, he drags her for quite some time, honestly, and I sort of have a thing about being dragged, so this was a little bit disturbing for me. But Alina is trying to kick herself free, but all around, all she just sees is smoke and Grisha fighting these bearded men, and suddenly the Darkling arrives. With a clap of his hands, the darkness just snakes its way into the fight, and some of the Fjordans just like immediately drop their swords, right? Alina takes her chance to call out to him for help, but the Fjordan quickly grabs her in the dark with a knife to her heart. The Darkling, he's oddly calm. He simply is just letting the man know that he can release her, that the Fjordan can release her, and they can all be scurrying along their way. And of course, the Fjordan isn't that easily swayed. So he's just bringing his knife down to kill Alina, and then she hears this thunder clap, and then nothing. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound would come. The man on top of me had been cut in two. His head, his right shoulder, and his arm lay on the forest floor, his white hand still clasping the knife. Yes, that is right, my friends and family. It is the infamous cut that happens in the TV show. Darkling quickly has 20 men round up the horses, and he prepares Alina to get on the horse with him. Alina is understandably in shock, I think as anyone would, by having a horde of Fjordan assassins try to kill her, and then seeing a man cut in half right in front of her very eyes. I think anyone would be a little bit in shock after that. A decoy with a carriage is also set up as well to continue on their way. And while still in shock, she is happy to see that Fedior and Ivan are okay though. The Darkling recounts that it was a mistake to take the main road, as initially they were going for speed back to Os Ulta rather than stealth, and Alina just kind of blurts out, so you do make mistakes. So we do love a girl who just says anything. But the Darkling just gives her a half smile, noting that of course he makes mistakes, just not very often. He can tell Alina's thinking back to when he literally just cut a grown man in half less than 10 minutes ago, and with his own shadow magic, and he reassures that he had to do what he had to do, right? He was saving her life technically. He had to do it. And Alina does recognize that he saved her life, like she sees that in her mind, but understandably she's just a little bit overwhelmed. So a few days are now passing and they are just riding on horseback. Alina only rode with the Darkling though that first day when they were leaving, again, the assassination attempt. And the other days she rode on her own horse. But she always kind of knows exactly where the Darkling is in their little lineup of their riding though, just to note. And she is sore and stiff from riding, and while she wants the ride to be over with, She's also apprehensive of what will happen when they do arrive in Al Sulta, which is the capital of Ravka. She's nervous to disappoint the Darkling and the king of Ravka, and is also worried about what might be happening with Mal and how he's doing as well. Because again, she's kind of scurried away really quickly. She didn't get to say goodbye to Mal, and he was still injured when she left. So she thinks of writing to him, but she isn't really sure of what to say, and considers maybe it's better this way, since Mal, remember again, Mal was best boy, right? He was kind of on the track to being one of the best in the first army, and she's like, maybe I was the one holding him back this whole time, so maybe this is better, right? She's just kind of overthinking it. She's by herself in this camp. During their travels, Elena does notice that the Darkling only takes his share of rationed army food, and he also sits on like the cold, hard ground like everyone else. Like he doesn't get any special treatment. She says too that this general is the second in command to the king of their country, but he still sits on the ground with the rest of them. The Darkling catches Elena's eye and comes over to her for a little chit chat, and Elena just blurts out, "I'm not Grisha." Right? She's still convinced. Girl does not think she's Grisha. The amount of times Elena will say just stuff with absolutely no thought. Again, low self-esteem, but again, also just like blurt stuff out too at the same time. Of course, the Darkling knows that she is Grisha, but Elena's like, first of all, Grisha are beautiful, and she's like, I'm this skinny, scrawny little girl with spotty skin, dull hair. She's physically weak in comparison to other people as well. So she doesn't really see herself as this big, powerful Grisha that everyone is hinting that she's going to become. She really asks the Darkling how old he is, since he only looks to be, again, to his early to mid-20s in the book, and he tells her that he is 120 years old, and explains that a Grisha using their power makes them stronger. So strong Grisha tend to live naturally long lives, though he does admit that 120 is a very long life even for a Grisha. He also notes too that when a Grisha has an amplifier, it gives them more power, which then extends their life even more. And again, he is a living amplifier. So not only is he a powerful Grisha and being a living amplifier, again, having those two and two together, again, he kind of has even more of a length in life, more power essentially. And she immediately kind of puts two and two together and is like, so if someone were to kill you and wear your bones or teeth, like they would have like a lot of power. And he's kind of just like, I guess so, yeah. It's like, it's like to just jump to that conclusion immediately is a little crazy, but just thinking ahead, just blurting stuff out loud. Now, the Darkling wants to know what stories Elena has heard of him and the Grisha where she was growing up in Crimson. So she kind of starts off easily saying that the Darkling has strengthened Ravka's army by gathering more Grisha from outside of Ravka, but the Darkling says that the Grisha come willingly because they're treated better in Ravka. Okay. In Fjorda, they're burned at the stake as witches, Kirch sell Grisha as slaves, and the Shuhan dissect Grisha to try and understand how their powers work. I would say this is very important because it's one of the few times the book addresses how the world, one, sees Grisha, but more importantly, two, why the other countries don't like Ravka. Because Ravka is filled with these people with powers and he trains them to use their powers in a more effective manner. Again, in future books, we'll kind of look into that a little bit more, but just to know, that's why the Fjordan see them as witches and they're assassinating them as witches, and the Shuhan dissecting them. Honestly, the Kirch aren't really going to be in the Shadow and Bone trilogy as much, but in theory, the Kirch sell them as slaves, is what we are told. So Elena also admits that there was an old serf who told them that the Grisha are born soulless, and that only something truly evil could have created the Shadowfold. The Darkling says that it was his great-great-great-grandfather, the Black Heretic, who made the Shadowfold by mistake, and it was born of greed and perhaps evil. And every Darkling since his great-great-great-grandfather has tried to rectify this mistake and undo the damage. And he says for him personally, he has also been trying to make this right, and Elena is his first glimmer of hope. So with new technologies advancing, like guns for instance, he thinks that the Grisha power in itself is going to come to an end. And even with Ravka keeping up with the new technologies, they lose people every time they have to cross the Shadowfold. So having this divided country will eventually be their end, more so than the war with Fjorda and the Shuhan. Like they're going to be their own end essentially because of the Shadowfold. So he reiterates that Elena is going to help him destroy the Shadowfold. And Elena is still kind of in disbelief, thinking that this is all wild, but there has to be some kind of mistake. She does ask about the cut again to the Darkling, and he explains it's a high technique only few Grisha can do. He asks her if he had cut down the man with a sword, would she have felt any better? And at first she says that she isn't really sure, and the Darkling kind of just walks away, not saying anything, and she realizes that maybe what she just said there maybe just hurt his feelings a little bit, and she kind of feels a little bit bad about that. All right, so 2 days later, we are arriving in Os Ulta. So let's talk about the travel now from Kribersk to Os Ulta. So according to Google, a well-conditioned horse that has been trained for endurance specifically can travel up to 40 miles a day. It is not said how often they are switching out the horses here, but let's say they're switching them out at least once a day, as it's implied that they're riding hard, of course, and they're traveling roughly 80 miles a day by horse. Now, it's not clearly stated how long they're traveling, but they traveled a few days by carriage and then a few days on horseback. So we know at one point they're on night 5, and then 2 days later they arrive at Os Ulta. And in the next chapter, Alina will actually reference that it's been nearly a week since she left the army camp. So let's say the whole journey takes them 7 days to travel from Kribersk at the Shadowfold to Os Ulta, the Ravka's capital. So this would be 80 miles a day for 7 days is 560 miles. So for reference, New York City to Quebec City in Canada is about 520 miles. New York City to Queensboro, North Carolina is 538 miles. New York City to Columbus, Ohio is 556 miles. San Francisco to Las Vegas, though you do have to go around a mountain in this instance, is 566 miles. So I feel like this gives us a good span of how large Ravka is and how much distance they really covered in those 7 days of riding. So sometimes I feel like when you see these little maps from a book, it's hard to tell actually the distance between this location and this location, right? It doesn't really look that far, but in truth, they just rode for 7 days to travel this distance, right? The distance between Columbus, Ohio and New York City. Pretty far, honestly, all things considered. So Alina and Mal did their initial training just outside of Os Ulta before, so she kind of has been here before, but she's only ever been to the outskirts of the city. So as they're going into the main part of the city, Os Ulta is described to be a dream city. It's where all the government officials and the wealthy live, as well as being, again, Ravka's capital with the Grand Palace and the royal family, as well as the Little Palace with where all the Grisha are. The outskirts of the city are the same as any other city, pretty dirty, dingy. Again, once you go further into the city, it's like the streets are lined with these beautiful trees, and everywhere you look, there's these gorgeous parks and fountains and plazas and like playgrounds and stuff. And as they arrive at the palace, these guards line the entire walls. And she notes that for all its beauty and opulence, Ravka is still a country at war. The Darkling asks Alina what she thinks of the palace and states that he thinks it's the ugliest building he's ever seen. They approach a tunnel, and as they come through, they emerge into a new set of gardens and domes where the Little Palace is. And while smaller than the Grand Palace, the Little Palace is still pretty large, honestly. And Alina gets taken to her own private chambers and is reminded to lock the door once it is closed. So she dreams she is back in Kremzin, happy with Mal, when suddenly a Volcra descends and attacks them, and there's just blood everywhere. She wakes with like the stuttering heart, and she's momentarily a little disoriented, and she's kind of forgetting where she is and everything that's transpired. And then there is this loud, incessant knocking on the door. Someone's trying to knock her. She's forced out of bed, and in comes a whirlwind of servants, and easily the most beautiful girl Alina has ever seen. Yes, that is right, ladies and ladies. Genya has arrived. At first, Alina and Genya are a little prickly with each other. This was back in the day where girls couldn't be friends with one another. But let's also remember too that Alina did just travel for 7 days by horseback and had an assassination attempt on her life. And Genya, she's Genya, right? So Genya tells Alina she is to be presented to the King of Ravka in 1 hour, and she's there to help Alina look more presentable. So the servants bathe her and plop her down in front of Genya, and where Genya initially heals some of the bruises on her cheeks and some of the small cuts that she has, Alina just assumes that Genya is a healer. But Genya bitterly notes that she's not wearing red, because remember, all the Grisha wear the color kefta and embroidery color according to their training. Red keftas are for the corporal kai, ethereal kai wear blue keftas, and purple keftas are for the material kai. Genya is in a white kefta, and Alina notes she's never seen a Grisha in a white kefta before. Now, there is a line in this scene that is in the show, but is not in the book, so I figured I do want to point it out. When the servants are getting her ready to be presented to Genya, they make a comment that Alina's eyes look too shoo. Genya dismisses the servants immediately after this comment, and Alina turns to Genya, asking her not to change her eyes. As I mentioned before, Shunhan is described physically in this universe as East Asian people, and Alina is played by Jessie Maley, who is both English and Chinese. As someone who grew up East Asian, it is a very common microaggression or even just like flat out bullying sometimes for East Asians to be made fun of the shape of their eyes. So for the show to put this into the show and have an East Asian actor experiencing such this like flat out racism in our fantasy TV show, I feel like it's a pretty big deal, and I think it's a really good call out, honestly, to just highlight what East Asian people go through. And despite all the racism and bullying that Alina has received for looking too Shu, she still asks Jenya not to change her eyes, not to change her appearance for which she gets bullied for. Not that makes her someone an outsider, something that people assume that she is not Rafkin, even though she's born and raised her whole life in Rafka. The people assume that she's not Rafkin because she looks Shu, again, remember. So I think it's a pretty powerful message that she doesn't want to be changed. She wants to stay what she looks like in a country that does have all these microaggressions towards the Shuhan / in real life would be East Asian people. So I just wanted to point that out because it's in the show, it is not in the books though. But as we digress, again, Alina is still feeling a little prickly in a general sense because she's looking at this beautiful Grisha Jenya, and Jenya is saying like she needs to help make her be more presentable in a general sense. So she does snap at Jenya a few times because, again, she's kind of like a gorgeous Grisha. She just wouldn't understand what it's like again. This skinny, scrawny girl, dull hair, nothing too crazy to look at, in her opinion at the very least. And Jenya is kind of confused at why Alina's taking this so personally. So Alina asks, well, wouldn't you? And Jenya just responds, I have no idea. I have always been beautiful. I just love Jenya so much, honestly. Jenya explains that beauty doesn't matter to the Darkling. He only really cares about what you can do. But the king, however, the king values beauty, and the Darkling is trying to appeal to the king and his court. So Alina has to look the part. Jenya assures her that she isn't ugly. She's like, you're not an ugly girl. But again, she has been traveling for those 7 days on horseback. So when Alina finally agrees for Jenya to work on her, she can sense that Jenya is relieved. And she wonders what the Darkling maybe would have done to Jenya if Alina had just like flat out refused to receive, again, like this little beauty treatment for her. So Jenya can't actually make anything like too crazy different about your appearance, but rather she can do things like smoothing out the skin, adding some shine to the hair, erasing bags under your eyes, kind of things like that. In the show too, she can also apply like light makeup to your face as well. And as she's working, Alina can't help but wonder what Mal would think if he saw her looking all polished up like this. Jenya tells Alina that this only lasts a few days, but perhaps it's better for Alina not to attract too much attention, especially from the king. Alina is surprised to be put in a clean version of the First Army uniform, as reminded that the king is expecting a humble girl plucked from his army, right? Not a girl that the Darkling has been secretly hiding away this whole time, all these years. Alina is not very quick to court politics. Jenya also tells Alina that if anyone asks, she only helped Alina get dressed, and she's not allowed to tailor Grisha. Alina is surprised by this, and Jenya says it's because the ridiculous queen and her more ridiculous court think it's not fair. And Alina is taken aback. She's like, whoa, you're talking about treason. This is treason to talk about the queen in this way, right? She's like, how can you say that? But Jenya is completely unconcerned. So again, slow to court politics. Jenya takes Alina to where all the other Grisha are, and Alina notes that they're all beautiful, and she feels even more out of place, but she is grateful for Jenya's help, again, in making her look a little bit more presentable. A Grisha in red comes over to introduce himself as Sergei and wants Alina to enter with him and the rest of the Corporal Kai. But then a Grisha in blue, Marie, stops him and says that Alina is a summoner and therefore she should be walking with the Ethereal Kai. I didn't print out a photo for Sergei, I'm suddenly realizing. I don't know why I didn't do that. So sorry to Sergei, he doesn't get a photo on the wall. But anyway, though, Sergei is like, you can't imagine that she entered the hall with the lower order Grisha. But Marie doesn't back down. She reminding him that the Darkling himself is technically a summoner, and Alina's just like, what's going on? And she's like, why don't I just walk with Jenya? And they all laugh at her, right? They're like, Jenya, and Jenya just kind of sort of shakes her head at her. Again, slow to court politics. But they are all saved anyway from this fight, because then a low voice breaks through it all. She'll walk with me. The room immediately breaks into a bustle as everyone is lining up and getting ready to head over to the throne room at the Grand Palace. The Darkling comments how Alina looks well rested, and she feels grateful for Jenya's help again, as normally she would feel so plain in comparison to all these beautiful Grisha. And the Darkling says that Jenya is unique, like us. And Alina can't help but feel this little thrill when he refers to them as an us. So Alina notices that Genya isn't walking with the other Grisha either, and the Darkling says that she must attend to the queen. The Darkling tells Alina, when Genya's abilities begin to show themselves, I could have had her choose between becoming a fabricator or a corporal kai. Instead, I cultivated her particular affinity and made her a gift to the queen. This is actually very, very important. That's just like, it almost feels like a throwaway line in this book, but it's very important, but it will not be relevant until the King of Scars duology. So just keep that in mind though, that Genya could have been trained as a fabricator or corporalnik, and the Darkling had her trained as something different, thus creating the tailor position. In the books, Genya is the only tailor like of existence, so to speak. In the show, it's implied that there are other tailors, they're just not as popular. But here, she's like the first of her kind though. But again, just keep that in mind. One day we're going to call back to this moment. One day. Alina immediately clocks that this means Genya, even though Grisha, is basically a servant because she serves the queen. And the Darkling says, we all serve someone. Alina is expected to put on a demonstration for the king and his court, and isn't sure how she's going to be able to do this because she's like, I don't have Grisha powers, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And she snaps at the Darkling actually for not noting how not only is this unfair to just parade her around the Ravkan court, but also just expect her to show off this power that she barely knows she has no control over yet. And he says to her, I hope you don't expect fairness from me, Alina. It isn't one of my specialties. And Alina just does not know what to make of that. So just gotta move on from that, right? The throne room is one of the most immaculate and elegant spaces Alina has ever seen. We're talking 3-story, high-pitched marble ceilings, polished floors, the gold double eagle of like the Ravkan crest on like every window, opulent, elegant. Alina always thought that the hungry Ravkan peasants and the poorly supplied soldiers were all because of the war. But now she isn't so sure because this room is full of military officials and wealthy men and noblewomen and these like sparkling gowns and dressed to the nines, which is only weird to me because like it can't be more than noon right now. Again, Alina only woke up like maybe 2 hours ago, and it's definitely possible that she slept in today, of course. But can you imagine putting on like a full gown and makeup for lunch? I don't know. So anyway, Alina is now presented to the King of Ravka. Here we have the King of Ravka. He's a round man in his 40s with watery eyes and a pale mustache. Alina also notices standing next to the king on the dais is a man in priest robes with a long, dark beard. And in this show, this character has no beard, which I think is kind of funny. The king gives Alina a little once-over, and he's like, she's very plain. And Alina in her head is like, you're one to talk, right? It's very like King Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves when King Henry VIII was like, Anne of Cleves is ugly, this like 18-year-old like beautiful young woman, and when this is like man in his 40s with gout and stuff. But again, not all these crusty, dusty men looking down at these like, teenage girls. The Darkling brings his hands together and the whole room swirls with darkness again. Even though Alina has experienced his darkness like this before, she's still a little disoriented before the Darkling takes her hand. And she again feels that call, something pure and demanding rising up in her. And this time she just lets the call be answered. She was like before, again, she's trying to squish her feelings. But this time she lets it be answered and the room fills with light. Her light is warm and bright and it shatters the darkness around them. And the people are ecstatic. They are clapping and hugging. One woman even faints. The king is beside himself. He is so excited, so happy. And he rushes down to kiss Alina's hand, which does kind of gross her out a bit, and she can't help but think back to Genya's comment earlier. And the king takes the Darkling away so they can start discussing plans, and Alina is rushed by people trying to get close to her and talk to her and congratulate her. But luckily she gets saved by Genya, but not really too much saved because Genya whispers in her ear that the queen wants to meet her. I feel bad because the king and queen do have names, but I just put king and queen on the little cards. But all right, so the queen is a beautiful woman, but in a cold way. Her skin is too smooth. It's a little too shiny. Her hair is too yellow and glossy. So Genya presents Alina to the queen with these low, graceful curtsy. And the queen asks Alina a few questions like, where is she from? And she says that like, oh, we have to notify your family, of course, immediately. And Alina doesn't want to start lying to royalty. So she immediately just quietly says, like, actually, she grew up in Duke Karemzin's estate. And so the queen and her ladies are delighted to hear that Alina is an orphan. And Alina's like, I guess it's cool my parents died, right? So the Darkling then finds the two of them shortly after, and he asks Alina what she thought of the queen. And Alina, again, not being well versed in court politics, is like, well, she said nice words to me, but the whole time it felt like she was eyeing me up, like something a dog would spit up. And the Darkling and Alina just kind of find that a little bit amusing. And Alina notes that the king seemed pleased, right? She's like, the king seemed happy. And the Darkling responds, the king is a child. Alina is shocked again at this comment, as this is treason to talk about the king and queen in such a way. But the Darkling and Genya literally don't even blink an eye. But Alina does ask the Darkling about the man in the robes who is standing next to the king. And the Darkling tells us that he is the Apparat. He is a sort of a priest in a way, though some say he's a fanatic. While some think he's a fraud, but the Darkling says that sometimes he has his uses. And we will learn more about him in chapters to come. In the TV show, he doesn't come into the show until season 2, and even in this book, we won't see much of him. But let me tell you, we will be seeing more of this dude, don't you worry. So the Darkling dismisses Genya and Alina so she can go get some rest and be fitted for her kefta. And he says that Alina's kefta can be black. Our low self-esteem girly, but also with that energy to also stick up for herself. She stops him and says, like, wait, she wants to wear a blue kefta, which is the summoner's colors. And Genya is shocked at this because not only is it an honor to wear the Darkling's colors, black, but it would show the rest of the Grisha her position of power and where she stands. Which Alina does recognize that Genya is wearing white, which is the servant's colors. But again, she doesn't want to stick out too much against the other Grisha. She already feels like an other, so to speak. So she wants a blue kefta. Alina also asks Genya to have dinner with her as well. And Genya is surprised at this. Again, court politics. Genya kind of tries to explain a little bit how things work there, saying how the Grisha don't see her on the same level as them. She's the queen's pet in a way, right? She's not like a true Grisha like everyone else. And she's also not really a servant either. She's a pet to the queen. And she isn't really anything of note. And how it's a great honor for someone like Alina, who is so, so well regarded by the Darkling, to want to dine with her, to want to be friendly with her. And Alina is honestly just kind of grateful for Genya's company, because she's kind of like, I guess at least I have one friend in this place, one person who's being genuine with me, not, people who are trying to get me to better themselves. So she has that at the very least. But she does not sleep that well that night. Again, like I said earlier, girl doesn't sleep well at all. She doesn't sleep well, doesn't eat well. And she notes that even though that she's in this luxurious room, this like beautiful bed that she's never had like a bed like this before, again, she's still not sleeping well. And in the morning, a servant comes to deliver her new midnight blue kefta and clothing. And while at the time, again, no one's really told her the schedule of this place. So she's like, to bathe or not to bathe. And she also can't help herself to like ring a servant for tea because she's never done that before. So she just gets dressed in her new kefta. She describes the clothes as similar to what peasants wear, but with much finer cloth. But she also feels a bit silly about how to put on the kefta because, again, she's still in denial about being Grisha. She's still like, that one day I'm going to wake up and this is all just going to be a dream. So all summoner keftas are, again, the midnight blue, but they are embroidered with their designation. So pale blue is for tide makers, who are like our waterbenders, red for inferni, who are our firebenders, and then silver for squallers, who are our airbenders. And her kefta is embroidered with gold as a sun summoner. Again, there's no earthbenders in this world. Leigh, how come there are no earthbenders? Genya comes over to knock on her door at this moment, and she notes how she looks really nice, but she would look better in black, right? She's like, well, you should have gotten the black kefta. But she takes her down to the hall where all of the Grishas dine, kind of like the mess hall in a way, but it's like an opulent mess hall. As soon as they enter the other hall, all of the other Grisha immediately come over to her and start introducing themselves. And there's two other girls in summoner's robes. The first is Marie. And then Marie also introduces her to Nadia as well. Again, I didn't print out Sergi, so sorry to Sergi, but he did make the wall. And so Marie and Nadia tell Alina that they should come sit with them for breakfast. So Marie and Genya get into a little spiff, I would say, with Marie and Nadia thinking of themselves better than Genya. And Genya just holds her head high, ignoring them. So the summoners sit to the right of the Darkling's seat, and Alina, again, not really used to court politics, is like, why is it a big deal who sit to his right if the corporal Nick or sit to his left, right on the other side? We're all equidistant from him, technically. Again, just kind of being shown the classism within the own Grisha ranks as well. In the show, the tables are kind of in this triangle shape, and it's not really described in a triangle shape in the book, but I guess maybe we could go with long tables in a triangle shape. Not really sure, honestly. So some of the other summoners join them and ask Alina like rounds of questions, like the common questions like, where are you from? Were you really a map maker? It's like, did you actually kill any of the Volcra when you were in the Shadowfold? And she's like, actually, no, I didn't really kill any Volcra. But in reality, she's actually not sure if she killed any. I would argue maybe she did, but again, none of us actually know as of right now if she killed any. But Alina is spared any further embarrassment as Genya arrives to take her on a tour of the Little Palace in general sense. Genya assumes the breakfast is awful because of the herring and the rye bread that they have for breakfast rather than the forced socialization that Alina had to adore. And she says that the Darkling likes to have them have hearty peasant food to remind them they're all real Rothkins. And Alina just thinks to herself, we're eating herring, sure, but we're eating it off porcelain plates under a gold dome. So like, sure, I suppose we are real Rothkins in that sense. Though it's okay because Genya doesn't have to eat herring. Because one of the cook's daughters has terrible spots, so Genya took care of that for her. And now the cook will send Genya the pastries that the Grand Palace has for their breakfast. And Alina notes that while the other Grisha look down on her, she does hold a lot of her own power and influence over this whole situation. So we get a full tour of the Little Palace. It's honestly very descriptive, but the highlights are, first up, the library is huge, and Alina will have all of her history and theory here to study the small science. We learn a lot more about the small science in the books and the TV show, but we'll run into the small science a little bit more when Alina starts to study it. But she is in awe of how magnificent the library is and wishes that Mal were here to see it. There is a closed-off section with red doors and no windows where the Corporalnik study, which Alina does ask why they don't have windows, and which they use like skylights for light instead of like regular windows. And Alina says it's because their training is more secretive, and honestly, that's never really explained. So, more secretive apparently. We then enter the fabricator's workshop, and this is a very brightly lit room with lots of fabric and metals and glass all over the place. And Genya leads her back to a material guy named David. So let's put David up on the board. David barely looks up from the work that he's doing to even acknowledge Genya or Alina. So even though Genya is actively saying hello to him, barely is looking up to him. And so while all the other fabricators and honestly all the other Grisha were kind of gawking at Alina this entire time, David's just going right back to work. He's like, whatever. When Genya mentions that this is Alina and that she is the sun summoner, he does look up and says like, oh, like the discs that I'm working on are actually for you. Like this is, what I'm currently working on. And Alina is not really sure what to make of this encounter, but Genya just kind of shrugs and rolls her eyes, and she deliberately tells David goodbye. And again, he barely even acknowledges them as they're walking away. Genya then tells her that David is a great metal worker and is able to fold metal so sharp that it can cut through flesh like water. But if you're not made of metal or glass, he isn't interested. And Alina isn't blind, y'all. She has spent the last 10 years in love with her best friend, right? So she can spot a crush a mile away. But she very smartly doesn't say anything yet to Genya. So as they continue on their tour, Genya points out the far lake where the summoners' pavilions are. And Alina's first kind of confused, like, why is it so far away? She's like, I have to walk out all that way to go practice. And Genya says it is the safest place for summoners because an untrained Inferni could accidentally set the place on fire, right? So makes sense, a little bit further out for safety. Genya also says there's another fabricator workshop outside the city where they work on their blast powers. And she says that she can organize a tour of that too if Alina is interested. Although we never actually get a tour of that place, so don't look forward to that. Okay. So heading outside now, they pass by a schoolyard with young children in blue, red, and purple clothes. Alina is surprised at how young they all are, but remember, when you're tested to be Grisha, you're immediately taken here to the Little Palace to learn and train your powers. So Genya says when they finish school, they'll either become members of the Second Army, again, the Grisha army for the war, or they will go serve at a great house of a noble family, or a select few will continue their studies and join the Darkling's service, such as like what Ivan and Fedor are doing. Their families are compensated heavily, but Lena is like, don't those kids ever go home and see their families? And Genya responds that she hasn't seen her families in years, right? She hasn't seen her family since maybe she was 5 years old, and she considers the Little Palace to be her home. But Alina, she isn't really convinced though. Remember, Genya is wearing servant's colors, and then she's treated as an outcast by the other Grisha in the Little Palace. And Alina herself has lived in Kremzin most of her life, and even there and in the army, she never felt like she truly belonged. The only place she really felt like she belonged was with Mal. And so she is kind of wondering, perhaps her and Genya aren't really so different after all. Like, they have more in common than she initially thought. Genya leads Alina to a little stone hut, assuring her that Bagra isn't that bad, and that she'll get used to her. Upon entering, a blast of heat hits Alina, making her sweat in her new clothes immediately. And here we meet Bagra. Alina can't even tell what color kefta that Bagra is wearing because it's so old, and she's like, the woman looks so ancient though she notes that her skin is actually quite smooth. It's just like pulled taut against the bones on her face. Her back was straight, her body wiry like a Suli acrobat, her coal black hair untouched by gray. And I just want to call out that quote because it's the first mention of the Suli in the book, which is actually Lee's fictional version of like Indian Asian ethnicity. So again, why really like a Suli acrobat? Just keep that in mind. Suli acrobat is going to come into play later on. So Bagara wants Alina to show her what she can do, in which Alina cannot do anything, right? She does not have control of her powers. But she learns that Bagrat is also an amplifier. So when she takes Alina's wrist, she feels that same call of power to like when the Darkling had touched her too. So Bagrat chides her for not being able to call her own power, and sadly, the day just does not improve, right? She's having a hard day. Alina has this stack of Grisha history and theory to learn. The other Grisha are already on like advanced theory and languages and military theory. But since she didn't study, the basics as a child, she just has a lot of catching up to do. And at lunch, Jenya isn't around, so she has to sit with the other ethereal Kai and just has to endure their catty banter throughout the day. And then Maria and Nadia also walk Alina to combat training, and they argue with Sergi on which language is worth learning. So Maria and Nadia are learning Suli in case they're sent northwest, and Sergi is studying Shu in case he's sent east. And they argue over which language is worth learning over the other, because according to Sergi, Suli is a dead language, whereas Shu is actually used. Now, it's one of those things in theory, it's like you don't know where you're going to be sent, so like they could be sent the opposite direction, so I guess you just never know. As they're walking to the stables for combat training, Alina has that feeling that someone is watching, and she eyes the apparat lurking in the shadows of some nearby trees. And he's kind of just watching her in his long, dirty robes and his dirty black beard. That's not in the photo because he has no beard in the show. I don't know why they took out his beard in the show. And while she's kind of annoyed at the cattiness of Maria and Nadia, she's also like, the eeriness of this dude is worse than their cattiness, so I will stick with them, right? All right, so now we have combat training with Bakin Yul Urdin. He's a former Shuhan mercenary that is particularly skilled in all forms of combat. He is not Grisha, and they are not allowed to use their Grisha powers while they are training again in this combat ring, because they're supposed to be learning like hand-to-hand combat basically. And so combat training goes as well as you can imagine it, which is absolutely terrible. Again, skinny, scrawny girl. She is weak, she has little endurance, and she's not very quick when it comes to like blocking punches. And he kind of chides her because he's like, weren't you in the first army, girl? It's like, how come you don't even have like the basics down here? Like your basic stances, your basic form. And he tells her that Alina has to start coming earlier now to combat training to train with him one-on-one. And dinner is no better either because Jenya again isn't around. And this time though at dinner, Alina does ask Marie like where Jenya is. So Marie tells her that Jenya dines at the Grand Palace and that Jenya's rooms are actually also in the Grand Palace as well, which is close to the Little Palace, but it's still like, a little short walk over there. Nadia says that this is so the queen can keep Jenya close to her and that she's always available. And Marie throws in, so does the king. And they kind of giggle about this rumor, and Alina is appalled, as we all should be appalled, right? And she remembers how gross the king had looked at her and was kind of looking at Alina. And then she thinks of how beautiful and gracious Jenya is, and she just immediately loses her appetite. So just as Alina's getting ready to excuse herself for bed, Ivan walks through the door, and he walks through the doors that are like behind the Darkling's table. I didn't really say that before, but like in their main hall where they eat, the Darkling has his own table behind. There's these doors that actually go to the Darkling's like office basically. And so he comes through and he comes straight to Alina. Doesn't look at any of these other guys, comes straight to Alina. And he says that the Darkling has requested Alina's presence, and immediately our low self-esteem girly is just like, Bagra probably told him how horrible today went and how I can't summon, and that she's a failure to us all. But in reality, the Darkling just wants to ask Alina how her day is. He says that she's probably tired. He asks her if she's a little homesick. This is her first time really being away from home. And he says that it'll be harder for her as an ethereal Kai too, because ethereal Kai typically pair up. So Inferni work in pairs, Squalors and Tidemakers often partner together as well. Which this is interesting because in the TV show, we actually see these Squalors and Inferni pair up. And I don't know how I can picture a Squalor and a Tidemaker, I guess, working together off the top of my head. So that's like saying a Squalor, so the airbenders and the waterbenders. Because in the show, you have the airbenders, so to speak. The Inferni will set something on fire, the Squalor puts out the fire with air, and that was how they were practicing. So I don't know what the Tidemakers and the Squalors are doing together. Alina doesn't really need yet another reminder that she's different and like an other, even in this like Grisha world. The Darkling brings her down this narrow door and points down the hallway and is like, if you take this, door and you turn left type of thing, you can go back up to the dormitories and avoid the main hall. And Lena is surprised because the Darkling, the all-powerful general of Ravka, just summoned her just to ask her about her day. And then is just letting her go to bed. And she's just like, huh. Wasn't expecting that, right? It's like she can't help but just like point this out to him because again, our girl just likes to like blurt things out. And the Darkling finds this amusing because he's kind of determined not to be the monster that everyone just assumes that he is because he is the Darkling and he can summon shadows. And so he catches how Alina rubs this scar on her palm. And he asks her where it came from. And she just says Crimson. And then he asks her if the tracker is an orphan too. And at first she thinks the Darkling can read minds because she was thinking of Mal in that moment. But then she recalls how Mal gave the testimony the day of like when they were in those tents, the day of when they were crossing the Shadowfold. And so Alina responds honestly. And she says like really? Mal is probably the best tracker that there is. And so the serfs at Crimson said he could make rabbits out of rocks. The Darkling muses to himself, I wonder sometimes how much we really understand our own gifts. And then he dismisses Alina down the little hall, and there she goes. So the next morning, Alina is so sore and her body's aching all over because, again, she had to train with Bakken and she'd never really done physical activity like that. So she has to really drag herself out of bed, but she does. And then the next day, she does it all over again and again and again. So she sort of has this guilt growing in her based on how the Darkling has said to her, you're the first glimmer of hope I've had in a long time. She realizes that if she actually can destroy the Shadowfold, it means all these merchants and soldiers wouldn't be at risk anymore. And yet Bagra still chides her that she can't even call her own power. So Bakken is working her to the bone and to build muscle and tells her she needs to eat more. But food has kind of lost its savor, right? Despite the luxurious bed she sleeps in, sleep invades her, she can't sleep at night. Her sallow eyes come back, her dull hair comes back as well too. And Bagra believes it's all connected. Her inability to call her power, her lack of appetite and sleep. She says, why do you waste all your strength fighting your true nature? And she's like, I'm not, right? I'm not fighting my true nature. Or at least she doesn't think so. And part of Alina's like, I've always been frail and weak. But if Bagra is right, does that mean my Grisha power would change that? Like she's kind of starting to think to herself. So Alina starts to distance herself from the other Grisha, and she can't because she can't practice with them because she can't summon. She can't go on the weekend trips down to like the main part of the altar like at the town because the Darkling is still worried about assassination attempts. She has to stay back at the little palace by herself, kind of like in Harry Potter where Harry can't go to Hogsmeade. The Darkling starts to barely even see her or even talk to her for a while. And when she does see him, it's always like at a distance and he doesn't usually even glance her way. So Alina convinces herself this is because the Darkling knows that she's not improving and knows that she can't summon and that she's like useless, right? She feels useless at the least. So in Grisha theory, we learn a little bit more about how their powers work, the Grisha power. While it looks like magic, Grisha power is really manipulating matter at its most fundamental levels. So this is all based in the idea that like calls to like. So that is said a lot in the overall book. Odina Kovast was the thisness of a thing that made it the same as everything else. Etovast was the thatness of the thing that made it different from everything else. Odina Kovast connected Grisha to the world, but it was the Etovast that gave them affinity for something like air or blood, or in my case, light. Now, if this makes no sense, it makes no sense to Alina or arguably to anyone else as well. It is a little bit confusing if I'm being honest. But the base principle, in my opinion, is that what I think is the most important is that these small signs is them manipulating matter at a base level. When a healer heals a cut, they're basically manipulating the body to just speed up the healing process. They're doing what the body would naturally do, but they're just speeding it up. And Inferni is summoning combustible materials in the air, but they still need a flint to actually spark the flame. And so this is the base principle that matters the most. And again, we're going to hear the like calls to like mantra in the future and in the entire series, so just keep that in the back of your head. And as Alina is studying, the apparat comes back for a little chit chat, and she tries to ignore him, but alas, he tells her that he is a spiritual advisor, and that if she ever feels lost, to come and find her. He also tells her that it's important that they are friends, which is gross to me, but he does say that. He also gives her a book called The Lives of Saints, And he ponders that the peasants love their saints and they love the miraculous things that saints do, but the peasants do not love the Grisha. So what is the difference? He thinks it's because Grisha do not suffer the same way the saints did in their stories. But you have suffered, haven't you, Alina Starkov? I think yes, and I think you will suffer more. What the heck is that supposed to mean? Alina's like, is this a threat? But no, his eyes are sad and full of sympathy. And understandably, Alina is very uncomfortable by all this. She rushes to her rooms where she tosses her book, that book that he just gave her, in the lower drawer. And she reminisces how she misses the easy days, right? The days of being a cartographer, being, you know, the routine of being in the First Army. But mainly how she really just misses Mal, right? She's homesick specifically more or less for Mal. And at this point, she has written him every single week, every week, and she has not heard back. So of course, the day cannot get any better. It can only get worse. The next morning, a raven-haired girl comes toting into the domed hall, and Alina immediately recognizes her as the girl that kind of had eyes for Mal way back when. Remember that black-haired girl in the blue carriage? And Marie and Nadia are also immediately annoyed that she's back, saying how this girl always acts like she's better than everyone else, how she's like more powerful than everyone else, the Darkling likes her better than everyone else. And Maria's like, it kind of sucks though, because she sort of is better than everyone else. She's a very, very powerful squaller and a skilled fighter who also just happens to be incredibly beautiful. And that is right, lady and ladies, it is Zoya. We have Zoya here. Now in this book, we may not be Zoya fans, but I will say, you just wait, because you will grow to love Zoya one day. I promise you that. We will all grow to love Zoya, but she is a mean girl in this book. So Alina is thinking, if Maria and Nadia think Zoya is the worst trait is snobbery, she's like, you know, you two don't really have a lot to be making judgments now. But when Zoya comes over to say hi to them, they're all smiles and hugs, right? They're all like, oh my gosh, Zoya, we missed you. How are you doing? How is your mission in the Second Army going? And they introduce her, Maria and Nadia introduce her to Alina. Though remember, Zoya technically already knows Alina because she was there the day that Alina sun summoned, you know, in the Shadowfold. So Zoya comes over to Alina, she gives her this big hug, and she's like, what an honor it is to meet the Sun Summoner. And as she kind of leans in to give her a hug, she whispers in her ear, you stink of Karamzin. And Alina realizes no one else heard that comment, obviously, and she's just completely embarrassed, completely taken off guard, doesn't say anything. It's just like, oh, okay, you know? And so, again, she's used to being bullied, but she hasn't really been outwardly bullied like this in kind of a while. So she just wasn't expecting it, threw her off guard. And of course, it gets worse because then they go to Bakin's training center, where Zoya now is buddy-buddy, of course, with Bakin, because remember, she's good at hand-to-hand combat just as much as she's good as a squaller. She's also speaking Shuhan fluently, perfectly, right? And remember, he used Shuhan. And Alina also notices that Zoya is wearing this bracelet studded in bone, meaning she has an amplifier. Bakin wants Zoya to teach Alina, like, you know, some of the ropes, right? He's like, oh yeah, it's like, you should teach her because she's still learning. It's like, she should learn from like one of the best. And Zoya is very smug about this. She gets a few really good hits in when they're training together. However, the extra hours that Alina has been putting in for training has definitely paying off because she sort of has that muscle memory that she's starting to build, and she is able at some point to trip Zoya over on her feet. And from Alina's point of view, she just sees Zoya slash out her arm, and then this whoosh of air kind of hits her, and before she knows it, she's like across the training room and she is slammed into a wall. She feels a crack, and when initially tries to be like, I'm fine, she finds she can't even speak, right? Like all the wind from her lungs have been blown out of her body, basically. And she distantly hears Bakin reprimanding Grisha, saying that Grisha power, remember, is not to be used in these training rooms. So Alina later wakes up in the infirmary where Marie and Nadia fill her in that Zoya got in trouble for using her power against her, and even came out of the Darkling's quarters crying. And at the end of the day, Zoya is just a squaller. No matter how powerful of a squaller is, she's still just a squaller, whereas Alina is the Sun Summoner. And Alina can feel the envy in Maria and Nadia's voices as they're kind of telling her this. And she sort of starts to wonder, what do these two girls say about me when I'm not around, right? She's like, if this is how they're speaking of Zoya, and again, they were all hugs and smiles when Zoya came in, they're like, are they doing the same to me? And so Elena's like, maybe we're not really friendly at all. Now, I will say in the TV show, Maria and Nadia are not as catty as they are in the books. I would say they're more like genuine friends to Elena in the show. But however, I'm always rooting for the girlies to be friends, and they will eventually all be friends. But again, in the first book, everyone's just a little catty. This book was still written, at the end of when like the girls can't be friends type of tropes. So Elena wakes up again in a few hours, and she's kind of surprised how good she's feeling, considering she had like a broken rib just a couple hours ago. But that relief of healing soon disappears when a slimy voice is in the corner of the room. And yes, it is the apparat back being creepy again. He tells Elena that it's essential that she stays well and that the Darkling needs to be more careful with his charges, meaning Zoya, or like people that he kind of favors. Elena can feel how alone the two of them are in this like empty infirmary. And the apparat murders to her that some of the villages have started making altars to her and that the people are hungry for hope. And Elena bursts out that she's not a saint. She's like, she's still thinking like, I'm not even Grisha, I'm no one. But the apparat says that it's a blessing. He whispers to her, you're becoming dangerous and you will become more dangerous still. He tells her that there is something more powerful than the army, something that can topple kings and even the Darkling. Faith is what he breathes. As he starts to reach for her, Elena grips the bedside table and she knocks over a glass just accidentally. And as the sound of the glass like topples over and breaks, a healer just comes rushing in and the apparat just slips back into the shadows. So Elena can't shake his words though. She's like, not the growing guilt that she feels, because remember, she still can't summon any light on her own. So she feels bad about that, and that all these people now are suddenly putting all this faith and hope into her, and she's like, I can't do anything yet. So now she feels like she's no longer failing just the Darkling. She's no longer failing just Bagda, but she's failing all of Ravka, and she just feels kind of horrible about it. So when she tells Genya about the encounter the next morning, Genya's like, he's creepy, but ultimately he's pretty harmless for the most part. And Elena wonders why he even came to see her in the first place. And Genya's like, maybe the king asked him to like pray for her something. Like, she doesn't really know either. But Elena does ask Genya for a favor to help her write to Mal. So she says that she really wants to figure out why she has not heard back from Mal in weeks. She's worried that maybe something happened to him. Like, again, he still is in the First Army and they are still at war. So she's like, maybe, has the worst happened. But she has been checking the list though. She's like, I haven't seen his name on a list yet. The list of, killed in action. So she's like, I'm not sure. So she asks Genya if she can help her. So Genya takes his name and his regiment, and she can use her own connections to find out where his regiment is and perhaps if he's okay or not. And Genya also offers to do some light tailoring work on Elena just to take care of like the bags under her eyes and everything. And at first Elena refuses because she's like, it's not going to make a difference. She's like, I'm still going to look tired. I'm still going to be scrawny. I'm still going to be like a little sickly. But she also knows her power is there, but she just can't understand why she can't reach it. And while Zoya was harsh on Elena, she can't help but feel that Zoya was kind of right. She's like, if Elena is thinking to herself, if I can't access my powers and learn how to use them soon, does she really belong in this like Grisha world? All right, buckle up, because this next chapter has 3 pages of notes all to itself. We are at a big chapter right now. So next morning, Elena arrives at Bagda's hut for her training, and she's surprised to see that the Darkling is inside, where they're clearly having a little argument with each other. The Darkling is actually defending Elena against Bagda's harsh words on how Elena still cannot summon her light on her own. He tells her to leave her be, and Bagda's eyes narrowed. You'd like that, wouldn't you? As they argue, Elena notices the slight straightening of his back as Bagda chides him, and again, surprised at how ruffled the Darkling is getting because of this old lady. Bagda says the Darkling wants to get Elena an amplifier to help her call her power, and Elena's like, what an amazing idea. Why didn't I think of that before? She's like, since the only time she can feel her power is when a living amplifier, either the two of them are touching her, is like maybe having an amplifier would help her access her powers. Bagda clearly disagrees with this, and to the point that the Darkling has to escort Elena outside of the hut so they can talk a little bit in private. So Elena also even brings up at how ruffled, again, the Darkling kind of is after talking to Bagda, and she asks him if she was his teacher too. And he tells her yes, but she catches a shadow crossing his face when he says that. Let's keep that in mind. The Darkling asks Elena if she has heard of Morozova's herd. So buckle in, this is going to affect the rest of the story. Morozova's herd. Elena has, but it's mainly been through children's stories. She recalls Anya Kuya, remember that lady, the woman at the orphanage, telling her about how the Morozova's herd were a herd of white magical deer that only appeared during twilight. The Darkling confirms that they're no more magical than the Grisha are magical, but they are very ancient and they are very powerful. Elena is honestly more shocked that they're real than anything else. and admits that Anya and Kunya's stories, they could talk, and if a hunter captured one of them and spared its life, the Morozova's herd could grant wishes. The Darkling does kind of laugh at this, and he's just like, and it's the first time Alina's ever heard him laugh before, so she's like, oh wow, like a little giggle, right, that she got out of him. And she recounts how it's a lovely dark sound. So Morozova's herd can't talk and they can't grant wishes, according to the Darkling, but otherwise he does believe they exist, and he believes that if you can take down Morozova's stag, like the leader of the herd, its antlers can be used to create an amplifier, a very, very powerful amplifier, perhaps powerful enough to destroy the fold. The herd itself has never been found, but the Darkling thinks the stag was meant for Alina. I realized I meant to print out the stag and I forgot, so the stag should be up on the wall, but I just forgot about it. So sorry, I'll have that for next video. I've been waiting for you a long time, Alina, he said. You and I are going to change the world. Our girl, of course, does not see herself as the world-changing type, but what else is she to say to the Darkling? So before he departs, he does ask Alina not to mention the stag to anyone else. He kind of just wants to keep it a little secret. So at first chance, Alina is in the library and she starts to do a little bit reading about amplifiers in a more general sense, just to learn more about them. So she learns that Grisha can only have one amplifier, and once the Grisha claims the amplifier claims the Grisha as well. So again, the like calls to like, right? They kind of work together in that sense. And it all has to do ultimately with balance. So the book that she finds says, amplifiers are a part of this balance, not a means of subverting it, and each Grisha would do well to remember this or risk the consequences. Alina considers this in the context of the Black Heretic, the Darkling again who made the Shadowfold all those years ago, the consequences of his greed and ambition that had left millions of people to suffer for many, many years. Autumn turns to winter and Alina still cannot summon any light, much to Bagra's dismay. Bagra sees it for what it is. Alina is just waiting now for the amplifier and has stopped trying. And part of Alina is just tired of trying and failing. The constant failing is just starting to weigh on her again. At this point, it's been like weeks that she's been trying and just failing. And a part of her does want to accept that she's just not like the other Grisha. Again, she doesn't feel like she belongs here in this world. So again, here's the proof of it, that she can't even summon. She's like, see, I knew I didn't belong here. She's kind of telling her, she's kind of doing that confirmation bias where she's like, I don't belong here, I can't summon, so that proves that I don't belong here. So one morning as she's walking to Bagra's hut, a servant gives her a note from Genya. Genya tells her that Mal's unit is stationed in the outpost most northern of Tisbeya, and that Alina can write to his regiment. She also mentions some good sweets at the Grand Palace is having that night, and that she'll bring some over in the evening. Alina is at first relieved that Mal is okay. He's with his regiment. He's probably just hunting winter game for the army, right? Again, winter is coming. But that quickly dissolves because Alina has been writing to Mal in care of his regiment this whole time. 4 weeks. And so for months and months now, she has not heard a single response back from Mal. So she has been pouring her heart out to him as well too, about what it's like at the little palace and teasing him about maybe he's run off with like a bride or something. And she starts pleading to herself for Mal not to forget her. And as tears kind of fall on her own face, she crumples that note from Genya and she wishes she could just forget it all. She wants to forget Mal, she wants to forget Kremzin, forget Anyakuya. And as she walks into Bagra's hut, Bagra can very clearly see that something is wrong. And Alina just snaps to her about how sick and tired she is of everything. But Bagra isn't stupid, right? This old lady. She's like, she knows it's not how Alina is sick and tired of the peasant food and being beaten up in training and not being able to set in. She's like, girl, you're homesick, aren't you? Bagra points out that she has it all at the little palace. A warm bed, food for every meal, the chance to be the Darkling's pets. And Alina snaps right back at her. She's like, I am not his pet, right? But Bagra's like, don't lie to me. I see how you look at him the same way all the rest of them look at him. 1,000 girls would kill to be in Alina's shoes. So Bagra's like, what's your sad little pining heart for? And Bagra just keeps pushing every single button, just pushing and pushing until Alina just stands up, so tired, she just wants to leave. And she's tired of Bagra's harsh words. And Bagra's like, where are you going to go now? What is even waiting for you out there? And Alina just turns around and shouts, nothing. No one. And her heart just snaps in two in that moment, because the truth has finally hit her in the face. The memory of when the Grecian examiners came to the orphanage rushes back to her in this moment. After so long of being alone and scared, Mal was this shining light in her life. And now these Grisha people are saying that they are going to be separated. If you're Grisha, you may be separated. And she remembers how the woman slid her hand around Alina's wrist. And Alina recalls A call rings through me. Something within me rises up to answer. I can't breathe. It's as if I'm kicking up from the bottom of a lake about to break the surface, my lungs aching for air. The woman in red watched me closely, her eyes narrowed. I hear Mal's voice through the library door. Alina, Alina. I know then. I know that we are different from one another. Terribly, irrevocably different. Alina, Alina. I make my choice. I grab hold of the thing inside me, and I push it down. So there we have it. The woman in red was an amplifier, and at 8 years old child, Alina was strong enough to suppress her Grisha power for the fear of being taken away from Mal, the only person who has ever shown her kindness, shown her love, who genuinely cares for her. So she pushed down, squashed that power, and held it there with all of her energy and all of her will without really consciously realizing it, so that she could stay with Mal. And she recalls how relieved she felt once the Grisha examiners didn't separate them, and how she looked in the mirror and saw those dark circles under her eyes for the first time, and how they've never really left her since. So now what? Now Mal has left her behind. In her eyes, right? She thinks Mal is left behind. The only person in the world who truly knew me had decided I wasn't worth the effort of a few words, but I was holding on still. And she recognizes all this time Bagara had been right. Deep down, she was still hoping that this was all a mistake, that she could leave and return back to Mal, and that they'd reunite and he'd suddenly realize how much he missed her, and they'd grow old together and they'd go to their meadow. But Mal had moved on. And as the grief of what could have been fills Alina, it's time for Alina, she realizes for herself, to move on as well. Alina reaches down inside her to that thing that she's kept hidden for so long, and she whispers to it that she's sorry that she left it alone inside of her in the dark, but that she's ready now. And she calls for her light, and the light answers. Alina fills the hut with her light, this bright, warm, radiating light, more powerful than she's ever felt, because for the first time, the light is all hers. At last, there is something that belonged wholly and completely to me. So suddenly, a lot of things are much easier for Alina. She's no longer winded when she walks upstairs. She can sleep a lot easier and a lot deeper. She wakes feeling refreshed for the first time ever. Food tastes great again, and she honestly can't even seem to eat enough at meal times. And calling to her power feels like nothing now. And sure, she doesn't have a lot of control over it like the other Grisha possibly have, but it's still effortless for her to call to it. Her mood and demeanor change so drastically that the other Grisha even notice it. And of course, the only one who knew she couldn't summon was Genya. So everyone else just comes up with these wild rumors on why she's suddenly looking so healthy and strong again. Now in the show, Maria and Nadia do kind of comment how they also struggle to summon at first as well. Marie even says in the show that Bagara, I think, like let a bunch of bees attack her or something like that. But again, in the book, they don't know that she can't summon, only Genya knew. So even with her, lessons with Bagara are also starting to go better again. So she's improving with every lesson, and calling to her power is never difficult. But Bagara tells her that her power serves her, that it's his purpose to serve her, and it cannot help but serve her. And Alina can't help feel that there is a second meaning behind Bagara's words, but she just can't really put her finger on it. So the fabricators gift Alina, David, gift Alina this glove that are lined with these tiny little mirrors, and she recognizes them as the discs that David was working on. And they allow Lena, as she's fighting, to kind of flash her light in her opponent's eyes like a little bit easier. So her lessons with Bakken are also going well too. For literally the first time ever, she's eating and sleeping well. So she's actually building muscle finally, and she's becoming faster in like a better hand-to-hand combat. And after a particular long lesson, Bakken gifts her with a Grisha steel knife. But no, not gift. Steel is earned. Alicia earned that knife. So she feels pretty proud of that, as she should. Alina actually starts to enjoy being at the little palace, hanging out with the other summoners, enjoying the good food. And though her favorite is still just sitting with Genya and just gossiping, just two girls chit-chatting, Genya tells her how wild things are kind of going over at the Grand Palace. She tells her that the most lavish ball is the one they throw at the end of the season, and every noble family will be in attendance, as well as the king's eldest son, the crown prince. But the crown prince is a bit of a drunk and be more focused on hunting and drinking and gambling. And Alina asks about the second son, and recalls how she's never seen the king and queen's second child. Genya lets slip that there are rumors that the second son actually isn't royal, a lot of little court gossip. But of course, no one knows for sure but the queen. But he is still the black sheep of the family. He went right into military and has always been away from court ever since, doing like various apprenticeships elsewhere. Maybe the second son will become relevant in the series. I don't know. Perhaps we'll see one day, right? So Genya notes how the second prince would probably get along well with David, actually, because he's such a workaholic. And Alina asks Genya what she and David even talk about. And Genya's like, the usual, life, love, the melting point of iron ore. She tries to insist that David is funny when he lets himself be, but of course, only Genya really sees that. And Lena tries to be reassuring, saying that, David will come around, some boys are just a little shy. And Genya remarks, maybe I should lie down on the table in the workroom and wait to see if he wells something to me. Another evening, Genya sneaks Alina into the Grand Palace to try on like different clothes and jewels in the queen's dressing room. And it's the first time Alina's ever looked at herself and realized maybe she is really beautiful. Alina notes how her night sessions with Bagra are the hardest. It's not said right now, but as Alina's power is light itself, she's stronger during the day, like when the sun is out. So practicing at night is crucial for her since there's going to be no light in the shadow fold for her to like summon. So Bagra pushes her hard in her night sessions, pushing Alina to her absolute limits. And though Alina didn't realize the Darkling was standing behind her watching, she whispers, it's not enough. Bagra actually praises Alina in this moment, a shock to us all, truly. And Bagra tells him that she is strong enough already, even without an amplifier. And the Darkling just brings up Morozova Stag again, and the Bagra gets annoyed with him all over again. They kind of snipe at each other a little bit, and even though Alina tries to say she can work harder, be better, she eventually relents that without the stag, her power will not be enough to actually destroy the fold. So the Darkling offers to walk Alina back to the Little Palace, and they talk a little bit more about the stag and about destroying the fold. And Alina feels a bit useless, but the Darkling assures her that he doesn't see her like that, and that no Grisha is powerful enough on their own to destroy the fold. He's like, don't feel bad about yourself. He's like, you're being a little hard on yourself. Like, it's okay that you would need an amplifier. The Darkling also apologized that he has asked Alina to trust him, but he hasn't actually delivered, right? Like, remember way back when he told her about Morozova's stag, he's like, trust me, I'm going to find it. It's been weeks. He still hasn't found it. And he's still struggling to locate the stag in a general sense. They believe that the herd has gone north into Fjorda, and he admits that maybe Bagra is right. Maybe he's chasing a fairy tale. Alina asks him why he lets Bagra get to him so much, and notes that she thinks maybe it's good for him. Everyone else is either too scared of him or trying to impress him. So for Bagra to kind of get on his back, she's like, maybe that's what you need, right? And he asks her if she's trying to impress him. And she's like, of course, right? Everyone's trying to impress you. And he says that perhaps he should count himself lucky that Alina's trying to impress him. Alina asks the Darkling what Bagra's Grisha power is. And interestingly enough, the Darkling tells her he thinks she was a tide maker, but that no one is actually old enough to remember. Interesting. The Darkling asks Alina if she would think he's mad because he still thinks they can find the stag. And Alina's like, why do you care what I think? And he says she's not sure, but he does care. And then he kisses her. Kind of happened so suddenly that I barely had time to react. One moment I was staring into his slate-colored eyes, and the next his lips were pressed into mine. Just as sudden as it started, he quickly steps back, looking as surprised as Alina feels, as surprised as we all feel, I think. And in that exact moment, Ivan comes around the corner, and he comes around telling him that the apparat is getting impatient because, again, he's supposed to have a meeting with the apparat. So the Darkling quickly composes himself, and that look of surprise is just gone from his face, and he bows at Alina and just like leaves. And Alina's just standing there confused as all heck. She's like, what just happened? The Darkling kissed her. The girl is literally in shock right now, and she wants to talk to Genya about it immediately, but Genya's over at the Grand Palace, and she doesn't really know how to get to the Grand Palace and walk through all the Grand Palace by herself. So instead, she just goes back to the other summoners, and she kind of hangs out with them for a little bit. They go over to the banya, which is basically like steam baths. And so Traya, she might to get the memory of the kiss off her mind. It's still lingering, even though she's, trying to have a good time with the other Grisha. But soon enough, we are at the end of the winter season, which means the Queen's feat at the Grand Palace is going to happen. This is the largest and the grandest ball of the entire year. and Grisha, all the Grisha, will be expected to put on a little show of their powers. The Darkling considers this to be a waste of time, since after all, they are at war, right? The country is at war, let's remember. They've been at war for hundreds of years, and he's like, we're using our valuable talents and time to waste it on, you know, the frivolity of entertaining nobles. Like, this is silly. But at the same time, sometimes a little bit of fun is important, even in war times. Like, you still need those moments of brightness, you know, at war times. So a lot is going to happen soon, so I'm going to sum up a few scenes a little bit more quick. So if you're a Shadow and Bone purist, I apologize, I may skip over a few little details, but Alina is still practicing with Baghra and is quite hard on herself still, that she can feel that she's reached the limit of her Grisha power and knows that it's still not strong enough to destroy the fold. Like, she's at her limit of power, and it's like, even the limit, my absolute stretch limit of my power is not going to be enough to destroy the fold. And that is something that's going to come back later, just in the general sense, like the limit of Grisha power. So just keep that in mind as well too. The Darkling has not been around, and Alina is still thinking about that kiss, though she hasn't told anyone about it yet, not even Genya. And the apparat is lurking around as always. And then we get a really long scene. It's actually going to span pages and pages of Alina and Genya getting ready for the ball. It's actually a lot of really cute scenes all together of them bantering and teasing one another. But the important things that happen are Genya looks gorgeous as always. David is not going to the ball because he doesn't like parties. All Grisha are going to receive new silk keftas for the ball, and Alina's comes in black silk. And Alina didn't ask for this, but she also doesn't really have time to refuse it now. And of course, it looks spectacular on her. Genya brings Alina to the dressing room where Zoya is getting ready so that she can show Alina in a large mirror basically how beautiful she is, but also so she can see Zoya's face that Alina is wearing the Darkling's colors. And so obviously Zoya is a little bit annoyed when she sees Alina in the black kefta, or the black silk kefta. But Alina, for the first time, really does see herself as beautiful, because again, her hollowed out cheeks and her bony shoulders are gone. She has more muscle now. She has color in her cheeks. And she's no longer that skinny, scrawny girl. But last but not least, Genya sees her beauty as well and gives a very loving and caring warning to Alina to be careful of powerful men. Alina first is flushed thinking about the kiss still, but she knows what Genya is referring to. Genya says that the king has his way with many servants, but even the jewels she gets out of it, of course, is not worth any of it. And Genya says the worst part of it is that everyone knows. And so again, remember Maria and Nadia were kind of snickering about it like the other day because they're mean girls. Again, in the show, they aren't like that, but in the book, mean girls. And she also says the Darkling has done a lot to protect her, and that but at the end of the day, they're all really just slaves to the king's whim. Now this man, disgusting man. Let's not forget that in the book, all of the characters are aged down a little bit, right? They're all a little bit younger. So again, in the show, they're all in their early to mid 20s, but in the book, they're all still teenagers. So Genya is supposed to be around-ish 17 years old, meaning that the king was sharing a bed with a minor. This started when she was a minor, let's remember, right? She was a child. She was gifted to the queen at like 10 years old. That is horrific. Absolutely disgusting and absolutely horrific. A disgusting, horrific man. But just know that this man deserves worse, in my opinion. He deserves absolute crimes. He deserves the prison in Azkaban. He deserves worse than that, if I'm being quite honest. I absolutely hate this man with so much because I love Genya. She's my favorite character, if you can't tell. And he is an absolutely disgusting, horrible man. I hate this man so much. Goodness gracious. But Genya is forced to endure and to live on. So shall we with this plot. But just know, disgusting man. So, all right. So the two of them head into the throes of the ball, and it is quite grand, quite elegant. We have circus performers. We have theater troops, choirs, dancers, and food is just everywhere. And like the good food, right? Not like the pickled herring and stuff like that they eat for breakfast. So everyone is drinking and eating, just having a really good time. And even Alina is being swept up in the festivities a little bit. She's like, this is actually pretty fun. She's introduced to countless noblemen and women and many military personnel. And she even sees Duke Remsen himself. Duke Remsen, the guy who owned the orphanage that she grew up in. Though Duke Remsen doesn't seem to recognize Alina at all, which does make her feel a little bit sad on the inside. Because she's kind of like, wow, I grew up in this man's house my entire childhood. He doesn't even know me. No, it's kind of funny because I feel like Duke Remsen had the chance to be a very interesting character in the story. But I kid you not, he's not even seen, like, he's not on the board because he's not really in the book at all for the most part. So, all right, soon enough, Genya is making her way back through the crowd back to Alina, turning the eyes of course, every merchant and nobleman, of course, to get Alina ready for the Grisha show. Demonstration, of course. The show combines Grisha summoners bending the elements in this beautiful and elaborate way set to music. And as Alina is watching them perform, she's struck with the idea to send some light between the mist of an Inferni and Tidemaker, and she creates this like shimmering rainbow in their performance. Before she knows it, the Darkling is standing behind Alina, walking up with her for their own little demonstration as the Sun Summoner. And right as they're about to go on, Ivan comes up behind the Darkling and whispers something in his ear. And Alina can just tell by the Darkling smile that he just received good news, right? He's like, oh, he's in good mood. So as they've done before, the Darkling claps his hands full of darkness to erupt in the room, and with a gentle signal to Alina, she lets her light shine. So her light bounces off her light of a fabricated mirror. It zigzags across the room, creating this elegant pattern of these like crisscrossing streams of gleaming sunlight. And her and the Darkling together then create this like large bloom of like light with like this like darkness between it and everything. And ends up creating this golden halo effect around the two of them. So similar to how the Darkling claps and his hands to make the room dark, Alina finishes her demonstration by clapping her hands with this brilliant white light exploding through the crowd. Now I just want to point out here, in the book, her light is always described as being this white light, whereas in the show, her light looks more like what the sun actually looks like because she's the Sun Summoner. So when I was reading this, I pictured, I guess, more of like what stars look like white light of a star rather than the yellowish orangey light of the sun. But yeah, that's just to say, in the book, it's always described as white light, and in the show, it's a little bit more yellowy, like sun-like. It's more scientific. I don't know, just a slight difference. All right, so the people in this ball, they are cheering, they are embracing, everyone is so excited. Again, some people had seen her powers, but not everyone who's at this ball has seen her. The rumors are true. The Sun Summoner is real. Everyone is ecstatic. Some people are laughing, some people are crying. A lot of people are shouting that the war is finally over. The Shadowfold is finally over as well. And it's a little overwhelming for Alina. Again, that self-doubt kind of starts to creep in a little bit, but the Darkling is kind of there to reassure her. So he pulls her into this narrow corner, and while Alina has been kissed before, it was nothing like this kiss. She feels as if her whole body has come awake. The strength of his arms are around her. She's fully swept up in the moment, but she senses something else. She pulls back just enough to ask him, because she can tell that while he wants this, that he also hates that he wants this too, and she can't help but ask why. So apparently the report that Ivan gave him earlier was that they found Morisova's stag. It's real. And within their grasp, they know where it is. And this means that the key to the Shadowfold is finally within their grasp. And that is exactly what it says. The key to the Shadowfold is within their grasp. And while he should be in the war room, my cat is knocking over my papers. Dusty. And while he should be in the war room strategizing, all he wants to do is be right here with Alina right now, making out hot and heavy style, right? So, and Alina's like, you know what? To heck with it all. And she just goes on with the kiss too. I'm not going to go into any much further detail of their little makeout sesh, but I would just watch the show of the scene if you really want to know, because it's basically that. Although I would say the Darkling is a bit more of an initiator, whereas in the show, Alina also kind of flirts as well too to initiate it. Here it's really all in the Darkling flirting with her, I would say. Although Alina obviously very much welcomes it. So they are interrupted by some party goers just right outside of where they're making out in the shadows, and they separate with like a little giggle. And the Darkling says he does need to head to the war room, and while Alina needs to go show face a little bit more at the party. And he says that even though she's going to go, he probably will not return. But then he asks her before he leaves, can I come to you tonight? And our girl is dumbfounded, and she actually isn't sure. She still feels the excitement and the rush of the kiss and his hands on her, but it's also like, this is happening quite fast, isn't it? And she's just in the moment, she's not sure what to say. But then as some people are coming through the hallway, he quickly leaves and she doesn't actually give him an answer. So her mind is still whirring as she rejoins the party and accepts more congratulations from more guests. And real quick, the apparat does try to get a quick moment with her, but she literally just runs from him because she doesn't want to talk to him. Although he does say that he must speak with her now that things are moving faster than he anticipated. But again, we do not hear any more of that before Alina is able to dodge out of the way from him. Also, another quick scene is that Fedior is at the party as well. And he's so sweet. I really love Fedior. He's like, you thought you weren't Grisha, but look at you now, girl, right? He's like, I knew you had it in you, which I think is just really sweet. So in this show, there's that cute scene between Fedior and Ivan when he's trying to get Ivan to eat sweets or something like that. And it's sort of hinted that the two of them maybe have something going on, but that is not in the books at all, though, unfortunately. Alina is finally able to step away from the party and retreat back to her rooms. But first, she heads outside for some fresh air. It's been a long day. She realizes that she should be thinking of the stag and destroying the Shadowfold, but if she's being honest, all she can kind of think about is that kiss. And she's like, is the Darkling actually going to come to her rooms tonight? And like, what does that even mean? What is he going to expect from her? She's kind of overthinking a little bit. And just as she's rounding the corner, heading to her room, a group of soldiers come out of the Darkling quarters, right? The war strategizing room. And who do you think on this wall is one of the soldiers who comes out of the Darkling's quarters? 3, 2, 1. That is right, ladies and ladies. Malian Orestev is here in the little palace, right? It's Mal. Of course it's Mal, right? Of course it had to be Mal, right? It is a book after all. Alina is immediately just elated to see Mal. She's like, she practically knocks this boy off his feet with the biggest hug ever. And she quickly puts 2 and 2, and she was like, you're the one who found Moristova's stag. You're the tracker. Of course. Like, how did she not know? She knew it had to be him. He's the best tracker, remember? Again, he can make rabbits out of rocks. But Mal, he's a little cold to her. He's like, there's no smiles, really no anything. Alina's like, well, sorry for when wasting your time. She's like, forget you can even be bothering me, that you couldn't even answer a letter. And Mal is confused because he says he never received any letters. But he also says that they've been constantly on the move to track the herd, that he's barely even seen the regiment. Alina really looks at Mal then, and she sees that there's this weariness in him, that there are shadows under his eyes, a jagged scar on his jaw, and there's something colder to him, something that Alina is unfamiliar with. And Alina believes him when he says that he didn't get any of her letters. But now it's Mal's turn to be angry at her. He's like, do you know how worried I've been over you? No one has heard a single thing about you since you left and disappeared. There were rumors of Alina being tortured, so when the task of looking for the herd with a report straight to the Darkling came up, Mal immediately signed up for it, hoping he gets some answers on Alina. And when he comes to Little Palace after months and months of trekking in the cold winter looking for the stag, he sees her little demonstration looking all happy and dandy, completely safe and sound, like buddy-buddy with the Darkling. And Alina first can't wrap her head around Mal caring about her because, again, low self-esteem girl, and she had convinced herself of his indifference after all this time. But she reminds him that she didn't ask for any of this, and he relents because he does know that that's true. And Alina tries to ask him, like, what's happened. Again, she can see this aching weariness in him, and he says that he just can't tell her. She traces that scar that's on his jaw, and before even thinking, she says, like, oh, well, Genya can fix this. And immediately when she says that, she knows, like, oh, shouldn't have said that. Mal snaps at her, saying that he doesn't need fixing. But then he does ask her if she's happy that she's here, and to which Alina isn't fully sure to a certain extent. And then Mal restates his question, is she happy with him, the Darkling? And she's wearing his colors and his symbol after all. And Alina is trying to downplay it. She's like, it's just clothes. But Mal's face twists into a cynical smile, and he knows that she doesn't just think that. The clothes, the jewels, even the way you look. He's all over you. The words hit me like a slap. In the dark of the hall, I felt the ugly flush creeping up my cheeks. She tries to say that it isn't like that, but she can feel how Mal can see right through her, right? This is her best friend of her whole childhood. He's seeing right through her. And especially to that kiss that she just had with the Darkling, just like, 2 hours ago? Not even that. And the way that the Darkling's hands were all over her body, to every fevered thought that she's ever had about the Darkling, she feels like Mal can just see it all, written all over her face. So Mal saw the way that he looked at Alina, and Alina practically shouts back that she likes the way the Darkling looks at her. Right now she's trying to, get a little defensive. And he says, just admit it. He sneered. He owns you. He owns you too. I lashed back. He owns us all. That wiped away his smile. No, he doesn't. Mal said fiercely. Not me. Not ever. After Mal storms off and Alina storms off the other way, that hot rush of tears stream down her face, and a big part of her wants to run back to Mal to take back everything she just said and beg him to stay with her. But another part of her realizes that she spent her entire life running after Mal, so she decides maybe it is time to just let him go. When Alina gets back to her room, she is understandably pretty devastated, pretty upset. She just saw her childhood best friend and just got into a huge fight with her childhood best friend. And she's thinking, I am never going to see him again. And that's how we left it, all the regrets. So she's crying to herself, and there is a soft knock at her door. And she's a little apprehensive that it could be the Darkling. And she can't even think of, what am I going to say to the Darkling if he's the one at the door? But when she opens it, it is no other than, who do you think? 3, 2, 1 on the board? Bagara. All right, now everyone, lock in, all right? This is major. What is going to happen is going to change the entire second half of the plot. Bagara takes Alina's hand and brings her through a hidden door passageway that we can only assume is like the servants' quarters. And Alina really only follows Bagara's orders since, one, she's kind of just used to following Bagara's orders, right? Girl is always just bossing people around. But two, she can see this intensity in her eyes and this genuine fear that has Alina a little bit on edge. Bagara gives Alina a set of plain clothes and insists that she must leave the palace immediately. Tonight. Right now. The Darkling is close to finding Morizova's stag, So Alina must flee the palace tonight. Alina is confused because all this time Bagda has been telling the Darkling that she doesn't believe in Morozova stags, that it's just a children's tale, it's a fairy tale. But Bagda is like, girl, that's what I told him, hoping that he'd give up on this whole thing. But once he has it, nothing will stop him. And Alina's like, stop him from what? Using the fold as a weapon. Alina is confused, and her immediate response is something is wrong with Bagdar. She's like, what does she mean, use the fold as a weapon? She insists that something must be wrong with her, and she kind of is like pushing back a little bit. Okay, buckle up everyone. Bagdar says that the Darkling is planning to use the fold as a weapon by expanding it. He never intended to destroy it, but used the fold to force his enemies to abide by him. With Alina's power on his side, he will finally be able to control the fold as he wishes. This has always been his intent when he created the fold. And Alina is confused because she's like, the Black Heretic created the fold hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But Bagdar simply opens her palms and these silky black shadows float down. You do not know him, Alina. It was the first time she ever used my name, but I do. And Alina sees it. She looks into Bagdra's eyes and sees the ghost of a beautiful woman who gave birth to a beautiful son. Yes, that is right, ladies and ladies. Bagdra is the Darkling's mother. Real quick, just to note, there were a few hints throughout the book that Bagdra may be the Darkling's mother. For instance, when she says that she couldn't tell what color her kefta was, it's because her kefta was black. When she first goes into that hut, it's always very dark inside of the hut and everything. It's because she can summon shadows the same way. So again, there were a few little hints that maybe, again, the way the Darkling always like talked to her, again, mother and son. So Alina's first thought is that he lied to her because she remembers, again, a few chapters ago, she point blank asked the Darkling what Bagdra's Grisha powers were. And he said no one was old enough to know and that maybe she was a tide maker. So Alina does clock that initial lie right away, right? But at the same time, to Bagdra, she's like, there's no way he's the Black Heretic. That was centuries ago. The Darkling himself said that the Black Heretic was evil. But Bagdra insists that the fold was not a mistake. The only mistake were the Volcra inside of the fold. He underestimated what that type of power at that magnitude might do to men. Because yes, that is right. The Shadow Fold used to be rich of fertile land, of farmers and small villages. And again, once the fold was created, those people didn't just poof and disappear. They became the Volcra. So those winged, hideous, eyeless creatures, those were once men and women and children, all reduced to these monstrous creatures living in the darkness. The Volcra is the only reason the Darkling hasn't been able to use the fold against his enemies. Bagdra calls them a punishment as a testimony to his arrogance. But Alina can change this. The Volcra can't stand sunlight. So once the Darkling uses Alina's power to subdue the Volcra, he can then enter the fold safely himself and finally have no limit to his power. Alina is in quiet denial about this, just repeating what the Darkling has kind of said to her, right? How he said he wants to make Rafka whole again. He spent his whole life searching for her and to make things right, and that she's the first glimmer of hope. And Bagdra just snapped at her, being like, the Darkling is ancient, girl. He has mastered the art of lying to lonely, naive little girls. Think, Alina, if Rafka is made whole, the Second Army will no longer be vital to its survival. The Darkling will be nothing but another servant of the king. But with the fold in his power, he will spread destruction before him. He will lay waste to the world, and he will never have to kneel to another king again. And Alina shouts back to Bagdra, even if she is speaking the truth, she would never help him do this. But Bagdra says with Morozova's stag's power, Alina will not have a choice. Morozova's stag is no ordinary amplifier. He will hunt it, he will kill it. He will take its antlers, and once he places them around your neck, you will belong to him completely. You will be the most powerful Grisha who has ever lived, and all that newfound power will be at his command. You will be bound to him forever, and you will be powerless to resist. And what makes Alina believe her isn't Bagdra's fear or intensity, but the pity in her voice. The pity from her teacher, who kept pushing Alina to do better, strengthen her power for herself. But the Darkling's words play back in her head. You know, that we all serve someone. The king is a child. You and I are going to change the world. And let's also not forget how he said before that the stag was the key to the Shadow Fold. So he lied to her about Bagdra. He lied to her about being the Black Heretic. And she thinks back to the night when he kissed her for the first time. She had been asking him about the stag and its power and why she couldn't just use like another amplifier. And she's thinking, was the kiss deliberate to distract her from questioning him more about Morozova's stag? Alina fully recognizes how desperate she was to belong somewhere and how proud she felt to be keeping his secrets and be on the in with him and feel like she belonged with him. So she never really questioned his motives ever at all. And she let him fill her mind with this fantasy of being at her side, of saving Ravka. And she remembers Alexei and all the others who were killed that day in the fold. And Alina would never want the fold to be used as a weapon. But then she also considers how the Darkling wants to use her, take away the only thing that has ever belonged truly to her. Remember how she felt when she first accessed her power, that was something that was wholly and completely hers? So at this point, she's made it pretty easy for him up until this point, but she's also deciding not anymore. That is right, after one intense conversation with Bagda, Alina believes her. Now, I do think it is a little crazy that Alina just believes Bagda after one conversation because, I mean, like a bit of a spoiler, I feel like it's a little obvious at this point, but Bagda is telling the truth. But I feel like it is just crazy to think that it's just like, wow, only took one conversation to convince this girl. But I think it's also, again, if we go back to all of Alina's low self-esteem and everything, again, like all the manipulation that he kind of used on her, you see the threads a little bit, but I do think some of those threads could have been a little bit stronger to hint at this. Alina can sense Bagda's belief that she's going along with the plan, which is for Alina to run as far away as she possibly can tonight, right now. She can sneak out of the palace grounds with the performers and travel through the fold to West Ravka. And at first, Alina's like, you want me to travel through the fold alone? And Bagda has no doubts, though. She says, she tells her that, like, you are strong enough. Like, why do you think she was pushing her so hard in training? Literally for this exact moment for Alina to run away. And Alina recalls how the Darkling didn't care for Bagda to train her. And she realizes it's because the Darkling preferred her to be weak. If she couldn't control her own power, it was easier for him to control her. But Bagda also didn't actually think the Darkling was going to find Morozova Stag this quickly. And Alina knows that this is Mal's doing, right? She's like, Mal is the best tracker. Of course, he was able to find Morozova Stag. So Bagda gives her a heavy cloak and an envelope of money, and they go through some more narrow corridors. And Alina asks her why she's helping her. Why is she betraying her own son? And Alina suddenly can see her features change. A life lived too long and seen too much. All those years ago, she said softly, before he dreamed of the Second Army, before he gave up his name and became the Darkling, he was just a brilliant, talented boy. I gave him his ambition. I gave him his pride. When the time came, I should have been the one to stop him. She smiled then, a small smile of such aching sadness that it was hard to look at. You think I don't love my son, she said, but I do. It is because I love him that I will not let him put himself beyond redemption. So Bagda says she will have a servant posted at Alina's door in case anyone comes looking for her, trying to buy her as much time as possible. And Alina has to admit, you need to post that servant tonight because, again, just a few hours ago, dude said he was going to come to her rooms tonight. But Bagda, she doesn't really say too much. She just kind of shakes her head and is like, foolish girl, right? Honestly, that's more embarrassing than anything else, I feel like. All right, Alina departs into the grounds, and all her training with Botkin has her more in shape to run seamlessly through like the grass and the trees. And she's able to sneak onto a theatrical troupe's wagon of props, and she kind of gets lucky because the cart takes her to the small village that's west of Os Alta in the right direction that she like wants to be heading. So as she's on the run, her mind is spinning. What will everyone think when she's gone? What about Genya? What if the Darkling is after her this very moment, getting ready to drag her back? But what if Bagda is wrong? What if this is all a mistake? What if Bagda is lying? But deep down, she knows it's true. She thinks back to her own words thrown at Mal, that he owns us all. And even deeper down, a little part of her wanted to belong to him. Maybe a small part of her still does want to belong to him. But nonetheless, she buys some dried meats and cheeses, and she just keeps journeying to Alsalta. She sticks to the woods and sleeps in the cover of farms and barns, though even though she is traveling alone, she doesn't actually feel lonely or miserable, even with the uncertainty of where she's going or what she'll do whenever she gets there. So about a week passes and she ends up in Ravost, where she starts seeing posters of her around as the Sun Summoner, because people are already worshipping, what she can do, right? She also encounters some soldiers as well, and she wonders why there aren't any search parties. Again, it's been like a week, right? And she's been missing the Sun Summoner. At this point, she would have assumed that like every regiment would be out looking for her for the most part. So as she's leaving the city, this drunk man kind of stumbles into her and kind of won't let her go. And so she's sort of forced to summon a little bit of her light to blind him so she can loosen his grip and escapes. But as soon as she does, a soldier comes out of bar and sees her do this, and he immediately recognizes her as the Sun Summoner. So even if the city doesn't know who she is, the Darkling's guards are out and about looking for her. And so now she is like, oh, I'm truly on the run now. So she runs through the city, she gets into the brush of the woods, and as she's running through the woods, she can hear the soldiers in the distance running after her, and they're searching for her, and she's starting to panic a little bit. And as she's panicking, she kind of stumbles down. She falls into like the cold river, and the icy grip of the water has her panicking even more. Like she can't really seem to stay afloat long enough to breathe, and the water just takes her down the river, right? She's in the current. So when the current finally slows, she's able to swim to the shore and she pulls herself out. But at this point, she's lost all the stuff, all like that bag that Bagda made her with like money and food and water and everything. lost it all, even her bedroll, everything is gone. All she has left is a knife that she has just like attached like on her person. But she realizes too, it wasn't even worth it to go down the river in the current because she can still hear those soldiers' voices kind of in the distance. But Alina is ready. She's ready to fight with her knife, with her power. Again, she's not going to go back and be some kind of prisoner and turn into a slave. And just as she's preparing herself to go on the offense, one of the soldiers shouts back that there's nothing there. So they start turning around and leave. And she is like, can I be that lucky? Like, was this just a trick or something? And as she's slowly turning to leave, she hears the softest of steps behind her. And she was so focused on that soldier who was in front of her, she didn't realize that someone snuck up behind her. And instantly that training kicks in, knife comes out, she's ready. But it's not just anyone, it's not just any soldier. And who do you think is standing there who found Alina all these miles away from the little palace? Yes, that is right, ladies and ladies. It is Mal. So who else was it going to be other than Mal? So Alina goes to say something, but Mal gives her the little aria of Montgomery, and gestures her to just follow him. So Alina and Mal together again, and they're running through the woods as silently as possible. A million questions are in Alina's mind as they're traveling. How did he find her? Was he tracking with the soldiers? Does that mean he's helping her? And she wants to give him the biggest hug for being there. But she also kind of wants to punch him in the eye as well for all those mean things that he said to her at the little palace last week, right? She's still not over that. So, all right, so they travel together for hours in silence. And while Alina is hurting, she doesn't want to complain or say anything either because she does realize that they are on the run because of her. And she also, because she took that icy tumble in the river, her clothes and her boots are soaking wet. And now she's hiking miles through the woods in wet boots and like a shivering coat. So finally, Mal says they can stop and they can take a little rest. And he goes back to cover their tracks so the other soldiers can't find them. And when they're finally alone, Alina just has to know, does the Darkling have Morozov's stag? And Mal says that he doesn't, but that he is close to it. Mal doesn't think they'll find the stag without him. And this isn't him doubting the talents of the First Army trackers, but he says that you have to have a feel for tracking a herd, especially that one since they aren't ordinary animals. And Alina thinks to herself that Mal isn't an ordinary tracker, so of course he was able to find this herd. She also wonders if there is more to Mal's talent. Is it more than just luck or practice? I don't know. Perhaps something to keep in mind, right? Mal's first question is, why did she run? And Alina doesn't even know where to start, so she feels a bit silly saying that if she told him she's trying to save the world, would he believe her? And his eyes go hard. So this isn't some kind of lover's quarrel where you turn around and go running back to him. So Alina actually finds this kind of funny, but she assures him that it is not, and that low-key she kind of wishes it was that, and it was as simple as that. So Mal does believe her when she says that, and he tells her to just get some rest. And as Alina is drifting off to sleep, she whispers to him, "Thanks for finding me." I wasn't sure if I was dreaming, but somewhere in the dark, I thought I heard him whisper, always. So the next morning, Mal is ready for answers, and Alina just gives it to him straight. Mal doesn't even blink when she tells him that the Darkling plans on using the fold as a weapon. What Mal doesn't know is about Morozov's stag. He knows the stag is valuable and that it was intended for Alina, and that they were told to corner the stag and possibly capture it, but not to harm it. And Alina explains the whole Grisha amplifier thing to him and how it's really for the Darkling, not her. She ends up filling him in on everything else, but things are still a little tense between them, because Mal's guard is clearly up, and they end up walking in silence, honestly, for most of the day. When they finally break for camp, Mal tells Alina that he's taking her north so they can keep hunting the stag. And while surprised at first, she realizes that Mal is right about this. In theory, the stag has the power to make Alina much more powerful than she already is, and with it, she has a chance to stand against the Darkling. But without it, she's just going to spend her entire life on the run. Mal says that he can tell that the stag is still out there and that the Darkling hasn't caught it yet. And Alina thinks back to how the Darkling had said that he could feel how the stag was meant for Alina. Alina asks Mal why he even came after her, because the two of them going after the stag now is basically a death sentence. And we learn that Mal was actually on his way back up north to corner the stag, but then they got orders to turn around and look for Alina. The hard part was actually leading the others away from Alina before he could break away and meet her himself. And Alina feels a bit horrible about this because this means Mal is now a deserter of the First Army because of her. But even though Mal is still distant from her and that he still has his guard up, he's still focused on protecting her. So again, there's still this animosity between them, but no matter what, he's still looking out for her. So in the TV show too, it's made into a much bigger deal that Mal is a deserter from the First Army because of her. But in the book, it's not as big of a deal for whatever reason. So alright, so as the two of them are head up north, they have a brutal pace day in and day out. And as they're reaching the last of the small villages before they're truly just in the woods in the north, they stop to restock some of their supplies. At this point, Mal is still giving Alina the silence treatment. And Alina, racked with guilt, is just letting that silence stretch out between them because she doesn't even really know what to say. But it's at this village, and it's a little bit eerily quiet on the outskirts, that they realize that in the heart of the village that it is Butter Week. So what is Butter Week? In the week before spring, every nobleman was expected to ride out among his people with a cart giving out sweets and cheeses and breads and butter, I am assuming. And it's supposed to be one of the most exciting days for the village. And Alina and Mal have very fond memories of Butter Week where they grew up, because they'd help Ong and Kuya do all the baking, and they'd be allowed to ride in the cart and like hand out all the sweets to the village, because again, they grew up in the Duke's estate. So, and Alina really wants to go to these celebrations, but Mal is pretty hesitant, but relents that since there's going to be a lot of high crowds, a lot of people, like, they should be able to blend in. So Mal stocks up on a bunch of supplies, and Alina sneaks off to one of the carts to get one of like the sweet rolls. And Mal chides her on risking exposure, and as they're arguing, they don't hear a man holding up this like, that comes up with like a knife behind Mal. And ironically enough, the dude is actually just trying to rob them for their stuff and money. He doesn't know who he is. But Alina actually kind of laughed because she's like, wow, they're just trying to rob us. Just casual robbers, right? In the midst of all this wildness, just the casual robber coming for your money, right? The robbers aren't dumb though. They recognize that Mal has an army rifle, and that they had heard that there was a soldier who had gone missing, and they deduced maybe he is the deserter that the soldiers were talking about. One thing leads to another. There is a brawl, and Alina is actually the one to win this fight with a good old kick to the groin, right? Sometimes you don't need powers, you just need a good kick to the groin. And again, backed by that muscle that she got with Bakken from training. So they end up getting away, but now they know that these guys that tried to rob them are going to report them like the very first chance they get, which means that the Darkling is going to know that they are heading north now, also hunting the stag. So now everyone's hunting the stag. So Mal feels foolish for letting them go into town like that and exposing themselves so flippantly. And Alina feels bad because, again, this whole endeavor was her idea, but she still has the sweet roll in her like back pocket. So she takes it out and kind of offers it lamely to Mal, being like, well, we still have the sweet roll. And at first Mal just hangs his head, his body shaking. And Alina first thinks that maybe he's like crying or something like that. But then she realizes that he's just laughing so hard he can barely breathe. And he just says, that better be one hell of a roll. So now they're both just hysterically laughing with each other, and like real laughter, real adjusting with each other in earnest. Again, best friends reunited now. And as they start to set off continuing north, Mal starts to ask a bit more daily questions. He asks things about Bakken, about the little palace, and Alina starts to share what it was like living there, right? Just like her day to day. And she realizes how much she just missed having her friend. And Mal is fully engaged for his part too. He's even laughing at her stories. He actually wants to know what it was like living at the little palace. Like, he's not just making idle conversation with her. And she's starting to feel that maybe they're back to being friends again. And she realizes that sure, maybe they're being hunted by the most powerful man in all of Rafka. And, but at the same time, at least having Mal on her side again, she feels a lot better, and she's able to sleep a lot more easily that night. So as they head further north, while Mal regrets what happens in the village, he can't deny that they did need those supplies that they got in the village, like the food and stuff like that. Also, because the more north they get, the colder it is, and they also are kind of running out of time to like keep stopping and hunting or setting traps, or again, there's no more villages really left to go. So Alina continues to tell Mal about the life in the little palace, and Mal isn't surprised at the contempt with the king. Apparently there has been grumbling even in the first army about the king. The Fjordans have guns that can fire 28 rounds per minute, but the king doesn't even seem interested in investing into technology like that for the first army. So when Alina tries to ask him about how the tracking of the stag went, Mal pointedly doesn't really say much about it, and in an effort to just keep conversation with him, she doesn't press it on him either. But Alina knows that they can't be staying ahead of the Darkling by too much. At this point, we know they're both parties are after the stag, and as they're falling asleep one night, Alina knows she can't put off this conversation any longer. So she says to him, if we don't make it, if they catch up to us before we find the stag, you can't let him take me. He went perfectly still. I could feel his heart beating. He was quiet for so long that I began to think he fell back asleep. Then he said, you can't ask that of me. Of course, Mal is like, I could never, and I will never kill my best friend. She's hinting that if the Darkling gets that stag and puts that collar over her, he will have full access to her power, full control over her, and she does not want to be responsible to the thousands, possibly millions of people who could die because he's controlling her and her power. She doesn't want to turn into some kind of monster. And so she forces Mal to promise her that if it comes to it, Mal won't let the Darkling take her, and he won't let the Darkling win. And they are forehead to forehead as Mal says that he promises to do this. When Alina opens her eyes, she's suddenly aware of how close they are, and how she can feel his warm breath on her face. They stare at each other for a long moment before Mal gets up and just walks off. And he's not going far, just off to think a little bit on his own, right? Again, she just asked him a pretty heavy thing of him. And the next morning, Mal has them up and out early, and he just has this feeling that they need to check the Western trails. Even though yesterday he had a feeling they had to check the Eastern trails, today is a new day, and today we are checking the Western trails. So they spend the whole day walking, Mal pointing out the signs of tracking like broken branches and moved leaves. By the evening, he looks up into the sky and says that it's going to snow, and he should have taken them to the woods for shelter, but he was just so sure for some reason. But Alina, she's not bothered by it by all, right? She's like, it's fine, we'll just continue tomorrow. And Alina summons some light to try and warm up, and even though Mal chides her that someone could see her light, he then just says, Mikhail is dead, and Alina's light just sputters out. He's dead. He was killed in Fjorda. Dubrov too. So yes, our two best friends, Mikhail and Dubrov, are no longer with us. Very sad, honestly. I will say in the TV show, they were more characters, but in the book, they were very much more just like background characters, if we're being really honest. They didn't really do a whole lot for the most part. But that is mainly just because we were in Alina's point of view the entire book, so we don't really have all of those like fun scenes that Mal has in the TV shows of just like him bantering around with his friends. But yeah, but I would say if this book was multiple points of view, we probably would have seen a lot more of Mikhail and Dubrov. Also, I just want to note too, we also don't get the funny scene where Dubrov, who finds deer poop and he thinks it's like magical deer poop, and he's just holding this poop being like, I'm going to keep this magical poop. But anyway, they are dead now, which is very, very sad. So Mal explains how they tracked the stag to Fjorda, and their captain suggested a small squad dressed in Fjordan clothes to cross over to keep searching. They all recognized this as a suicide mission, even joked about it, but then the next morning, Mal volunteered and Mikhail and Dubrov volunteered shortly after. And Alina is confused why Mal volunteered, and Mal just says that she saved him in the Shadowfold. She saved him in the Shadowfold. And then in the Grisha tent, when they led her away, he did nothing. And he just stood there and let them take her away. And Alina assures him that there was nothing he could have done. Like, even this whole time when she looks back on that memory, like, she never thought, like, how come Mal didn't do anything? Never had that thought. And she was like, it was a very chaotic moment. And the Darkling had her summoned in the tent, and then she was just ushered away in that carriage, and there was very little information of what was going on. She didn't even know what was going on. And he says, I know it doesn't make sense, but it's how I felt. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing you walk away, seeing you disappear. And Alina thinks back to all those nights she laid awake thinking of how much she missed Mal and how much she hoped he was doing okay and that he was doing well. And she had no idea that Mal was just missing her just as much. So Mal thought maybe tracking the stag, something that they were told was for the Darkling and for Alina, he thought that maybe he could help her somehow and like help make things right again. But Mikhail and Dubrov didn't know that. They didn't know all these inner thinkings that Mal had. They were just his friends, his best buddies. So they signed up too, and now they're dead. And Mal feels even more upset because the herd crossed back into Ravka just a few days later. So like, what was even the point? He got his best friends killed, for a mission that didn't even amount to anything. And Lena just feels so awful. Tells him how sorry she is, but she's also like, Mal, this isn't your fault. They made his own choices. They were both adults. They were both soldiers as well too, and they can make their own choices as soldiers and as adults. And Mal doesn't really know why they volunteered to follow him as well into Fjorda. And none of them are children anymore, and they all need to remember that. Even though in theory they kind of are children because they're like 17, 18 years old. But I understand what she means, right? She's like, they made their own choices, and he shouldn't be carrying the guilt of his friends dying on this mission. Like, it's not all on him. So the next morning we are off again, still in search of this stag, but when they wake up, a layer of snow covers every inch of the ground. So of course, covering their tracks is going to be nearly impossible. And you can just feel this weariness on both of them. Again, they've been traveling for weeks now in the cold, again, like living off like hard cheese, right? Like nothing too crazy. And there are bags under their eyes, again, both freezing cold. And out of instinct, Alina just reaches to hold Mal's hand, and she's surprised when he takes it. All right, so just as the sun is about to set, Mal apologizes kind of out of nowhere for everything. For what he said, the little palace, and Alina apologizes as well. He says he just can't get that picture of Alina and the Darkling out of his head. How happy she looked, and just how much she looked like she belonged there. Which again, in a sense, that's what Alina was looking for the whole time. And finally, that's what happened, right? That she finally found some place that she actually belonged. Alina admits that she was happy, right? In that moment, at least, she was pretty happy. She reminds Mal that she was never like him. She was always that awkward, scrawny girl who never really fit in with anyone or anywhere. I remember how Mal was always the best boy in the army, and Alina was just kind of there, She felt like more of a childhood obligation than anything else. But Mal says, you belonged with me. And Alina just kind of shakes her head. She remembers what it was really like. And he asks her if she missed him. And of course she did. I missed you every hour. And you know what the worst part was? It caught me completely by surprise. I'd watched myself walking around to find you, not for any reason, just out of habit, because I'd seen something that I wanted to tell you about or because I wanted to hear your voice. And then I realized that you weren't there anymore. And every single time, it was like having the wind knocked out of me. I've risked my life for you. I've walked half the length of Ravka for you, and I do it again and again and again just to be with you. Just to starve with you and freeze with you and hear you complain about hard cheese every day. So don't tell me we don't belong together, he said fiercely. He was very close. He was very close now. My heart was suddenly hammering in my chest. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you, Alina. But I see you now. And Alina thought she had left her love for Mal in the past. She thought that she'd buried this love for him the way she buried her Grisha power. But in this moment, in this kiss, she knows that what's been between them is just as bright as her light. And it is undeniable. So yes, they kiss. They realize they've had feelings for each other this whole time, right? I feel like we all knew that. But I'm a stupid boy, right? Boys are always stupid, right? My friends and family, I'm losing my voice right now. So we are going to power through the last little bit of this book. We are truly in Act 3 because just as they are breaking away of their kiss, out of the corner of her eye, Alina sees movement. And what do you think it is? It is Morozova's stag. There it is, the stag we've been searching for the second half of this book. And Mal, ever the soldier, is ready to take it down instantly, allowing Alina to make the killing blow. He urges her to be quick, but Alina is drawn to the creature. The stag doesn't even move as Alina approaches him and rests her hand on his muzzle. She thinks of everything her and Mal had to give up and the risks they've had to take to get to this creature, but she also feels his steady breath and can see in his dark eyes that she's not the one to end his life. It's this beautiful creature, this beautiful white stag. She believes that they can find another way. But then a soft whistle kind of whistles in her ear and it kind of braces right by her. And with a loud thunk, it finds its mark. The stag rears up, arrow in the middle of its chest, and he falls over. Alina staggers back and Mal is right up beside her, ready to go. You should have listened to him, Alina. That is right, everyone. The Darkling has caught up to them, and not only that, but he heard everything, that beautiful whole romantic love confession, the kiss, everything. The Darkling and Alina engage in a quick little battle of him surrounding them, with darkness, and Alina creating this bubble of light of her, Mal, and the stag as well with her. And the Darkling is even impressed on how well Bagra has trained her. But Alina can feel that limit of her power, again, the limit of Grisha power, and she knows she can't hold him back that much longer. Again, she doesn't even have an amplifier. She reminds Mal of his promise. You remember that promise? The one that Mal simply cannot let the Darkling take her. And unlike the TV show, Mal simply cannot do it. He just cannot. He cannot bring himself to kill his best friend. So he literally just confessed his love for her, 5 minutes ago. But how is he supposed to kill her now? So Alina loses her grip on the dome of sunshine that's around them, and they are engulfed in darkness. Ivan is there, and he apprehends Mal, and it's just two other guards that take Alina that we don't know. And we do not learn their names, so I guess they do not matter that much. It's not Fedior, at least. The Darkling wastes no time, and with a quick knife, he slits the stag's throat, ordering his guards to dismantle the antlers. Honestly, what is more shocking of who comes out of the shadows is no other than David. Alina is shocked at first, but then she realizes that he is the best fabricator to do the job. So they position the antlers onto Alina's collarbone. She whispers to him that he doesn't have to do this, but he just avoids meeting her eyes. David understands the future, said the Darkling, the edge of a threat in his voice, and he knows better than to fight it. Alina resists, and with one nod to Ivan, Mal is on the floor screaming in pain. And with Mal in pain, Alina knows that, she will do anything, right? It's this girl, wrapped around her finger in a bad way. It's whenever you have a loved one, they're going to use it against you. So she stays still as David attaches the collar of antlers to her collarbone. And at first, when David says he's done, she doesn't really feel that much different. So she's like, maybe it didn't work. But then that quickly dissolves once the Darkling rests his hand on her shoulder, and she feels a call of light inside of her, but it was like this invisible hand in her chest pulling her power. The light was there and it was bursting through her, flooding the clearing that they're in, but she can't feel it and she can't recall it either. Again, she can't resist this invisible hand that's inside of her. And she feels the command more and more and more, and the surge of power just keeps coming and just keeps rushing through her, all completely out of her control. Now remember too, the Darkling is his own amplifier, plus she's wearing an amplifier. And then now she's being amplified again by him. So like a lot of power all at once. So the little control she learned with Balgruta feels completely smashed apart as this light just explodes around her. And she feels no joy or exhilaration or lightness like she felt when she was trained with Balgruta. And again, the light is there, but it's not hers. And she just feels like she's drowning in this light rather than, again, having this warm light engulf her. She can tell the Darkling is testing the limits right now to see how far can he push the power. And she actually kind of loses sense of time a little bit because she doesn't know how long he kind of finally goes before he releases her. Now, in the show, David puts this little like token, like talisman, like in the Darkling's hand to indicate that that's how he's controlling Alina. And in the book, we don't need that. Like, we don't need the visual element. So he's just doing it without anything attached to him. Once the Darkling is done with his little test, he orders Mal to be put in chains and for the stag's body to be burned and to send word to the apparat that they will be leaving for the fold at first light. So they're taken back to where they had made camp, and Alina questions Ivan why he's doing all this. And Ivan is adamant that the Darkling intends to bring them peace. And Alina's like, at what cost? At thousands of people's lives cost? Ivan asks her if she knew that he had two brothers. But of course she wouldn't, because why would she know he has two brothers? But he says that she wouldn't know because his brothers were not born Grisha. And they died fighting in the king's army, in the first army on this war. The same as his father, the same as his uncle. And Alina just quietly says that she's sorry. And Ivan goes like, yeah, you know, everyone is sorry. Everyone is sorry. The king is sorry. The queen is sorry. But you know what? The only one who's willing to do something about this is the Darkling, right? He's the one that actually has a plan, and that's why he's following the Darkling's plan. And Alina insists that there has to be another way. And once the Darkling tastes this kind of power that will come from controlling the fold and not destroying it, it will only be a matter of time before they're all wearing collars and all under the Darkling's control even more. So the next day, they leave out to meet the rest of the Second Army in Kribersk along the fold. Mal is luckily not forced to walk along the entire leg because the Darkling doesn't want him alive, so he gets to ride on a horse. And again, he needs Mal alive so he can control Alina a little bit better, of course. It does take them a few hard days of travel to make it to Kribersk. We're not really told exactly how long. And Alina is kept mostly isolated from everyone. Even the Darkling doesn't really come up to her or say anything to her during these days of travel. And each night she dreams of the stag's dark eyes staring at her. And she feels really sorry and guilty every single time. And she feels like there is some clear message in her dream, but she can't really grasp it even when she wakes up. So when they arrive at Kribersk, the Darkling informs Alina that they will be greeted by the other Grisha, but she's not to say a single word about her little excursion, right? Her little excursion off to the north by herself. And Alina is surprised at this because she's like, they don't know? It's like they don't know? She's been gone for weeks at this point, months even maybe. And apparently they've been told that she's been in seclusion, preparing for the crossing of the fold with prayer and rest. Okay. Alina laughs because she's like, yeah, I look well rested, right? Girl who's been living in the woods on hard cheese, you know, for weeks and weeks on end. And the Darkling is just like, well, just say you've been fasting, right? Like, have to come up with something. So Alina realizes this is why none of the soldiers in any of the small villages her and Mal went through were looking for her, because not everyone knows that she left. Only, again, like a small elite group was like in search of her. Now the Darkling says it's because if word got out that she was gone, she would have been hunted and killed by Fjord assassins. And honestly, he was probably not wrong there necessarily. But Alina also points out that this means the Darkling lost their literal one and only sun summoner, which would also make him look bad. The Darkling then turns it on Mal, asking her, what kind of life do you think you could have had with him? He'll never understand you, her power. He'll only come to fear her eventually. And he says that there is no ordinary life for people like them. Again, he's still putting them in the same little bucket. But Alina just flatly states that she's nothing like him. And the Darkling is just like, sure, okay. But says that when they're greeted, she can say hello, she should plead exhaustion, and then she can just go retire to her tent. And if she does anything at all, anything out of line, he will have the tracker tortured until this man begs for his life. And so what is Alina to do? So she doesn't want to risk Mal. So when the other summoners, Maria and Nadia, are here, and even Sergei, who's here as well. So when they come up to her, they're all really excited to see her first because they haven't seen her in like weeks. But then when they look at her, they're a little concerned. They're all expecting to see the most powerful and greatest Grisha that there ever was. And instead they're looking at this pale, tired, kind of worn out girl. Like they're not expecting to see that. And Lena tries to feign her enthusiasm, of course, and let them marvel at Morozov's collar because you can see it. In the show, the collar like sinks into her skin, but in the book, it's just always out. But she can see the Darkling far off, kind of like watching her every move. So again, she's just trying to make sure she behaves so she can protect Mal. So when she gets to her, the privacy of her tent, she feels a bit strange seeing her old blue kefta just like sitting on a chair. And after everything that has happened, she's just like, it's weird to just go back to normal and pretend that nothing has happened. So she has guards stationed all around her tent 24/7, and she's kept pretty isolated. And after a few days, she starts to wonder what is taking the Darklings so long for them to cross the Shadowfold. So on the fourth night of waiting around, a familiar face comes to say hi. Yes, that is right. It is Genya. Genya has come. And the two joke around for a little bit. They give each other a hug, and Alina is a little bit weary because she doesn't know how much Genya knows. Genya says they've been told Alina's in seclusion preparing for the ordeal, and Alina carefully words herself, saying she didn't get a chance to say goodbye before she went away. And Genya confirms if she knew, she would have stopped her. So confirming Genya knows a little bit more than the other Grisha know. Alina also asks about Baghra, and Genya says no one has seen Baghra since Alina has left, and that she has gone into seclusion as well. Alina tries to say maybe getting word to the king would be helpful, but she's cut off with the information to the king. Genya tells her the king has taken ill and the apparat is ruling in his stead. She thinks back to how the Darkling had said that the apparat has his uses and how the apparat tried to get her attention about things. Was he trying to warn her? Was he loyal to the Darkling? She's just not really sure at this point. Alina then asks about the queen, and Genya tells her with a faint smile that the queen is also confined to her quarters because, of course, contamination. And it's in this moment Alina realizes what Genya's wearing. She's wearing a red kefta with blue embroidery, a color combination that has not been seen before, meaning she is no longer in servant white. She's being recognized as a corporal Kai, and she's a new embroidery because, again, she's the first tailor of her kind. Alina quietly wants to herself the role Genya is playing in order to wear the full Grisha colors, and Genya says with some sadness that she did try to warn Alina, right? She told her, you gotta be careful of powerful men. And Alina asks her if she knows what the Darkling intends to do, and she doesn't. She says that there are rumors, and Alina says that the rumors are likely true. Then Genya says, then it has to be done. I stared at her. After a moment, she looked down at her lap. Her fingers pleated and unpleated the folds of her kefta. David feels terrible, she whispered. He thinks he's destroyed all of Ravka. Alina recognizes that it's not David's fault, and she jokes how they've all done their part to bring the end of the world. And Genya is shocked by this and can't think that Alina really believes that. But Alina thinks about Mal and the Darkling's threats and says hollowly that of course she doesn't believe that. Like she wants to say anything too wrong in case the Darkling hears. So as Genya takes her leave, Alina says that for what it's worth, she forgives David. And to herself, she hopes that Genya hears that she forgives her as well too. Genya says that she will tell David, but Alina doesn't miss how her lovely eyes were full of tears. Which, let's not forget too, the king was the one assaulting her as a minor. That disgusting, unforgivable man. Don't forget, disgusting over here. So who do we really blame Genya for making this man who assaulted her all these years like a little bit sick? I personally don't blame her for taking her part in this. But at the same time, though, he's the one who did facilitate the abuse all of these years too, but she does not see that right away necessarily. She thinks the Darkling is going to save them as well too. At the end of the day, I still love Genya. I will still die on my hill for Genya. I still love her very much. Nothing could ever make me dislike Genya, if I'm being really honest. All right, as Alina is having dinner alone, she considers that maybe if David is having regrets, maybe there are other Grisha who don't agree with the Darkling as well too, right? Maybe some of her friends. Maybe they're just scared the way Genya is, because she can kind of tell Genya's going along with things, but she doesn't seem like enthusiastic about it. Like, you know, for instance, the way Ivan kind of seemed more enthusiastic about it. So soon enough, Ivan comes to summon her to the Darkling's tent. Alina knows no matter what she says, the Darkling is just going to go ahead with his plans, but the Darkling threatens Mal's life, which Alina just confirms that Mal is still alive. He's like, if he's threatening his life, he can't be dead, right? At this point, it's been almost a week since she's been sequestered away in her little private tent, not knowing what even happened to Mal or to anyone else at this point. She tells the Darkling that whatever he wants to do, she'll do it. She just wants Mal's life spared at this point. The Darkling is like, he's a traitor, he's a deserter, but Alina points out that he's also the best tracker that the Darkling will ever have. Remember, he's the one who found Morozov's stack. The Darkling seems indifferent to this, but she knows he's greedy, and having a good tracker in your back pocket may not be a bad thing. So Alina suggests exiling him to the north, but the Darkling sees through this, knowing that Alina will just assume she can break free one day and try to go meet up with him again in the future. The Darkling is annoyed because he feels like he gave Alina all this power, and all she wants to do is be with some boy who will just never understand her power. Alina asserts that he didn't give her this power, right? She's always had this power, and he intends to make her a slave. The Darkling begins talking about how he couldn't take chances, that Ravka's future is hanging in the balance, and it's all up to him. And Alina sort of rolls her eyes because she knows the Darkling doesn't care about Ravka. He only cares about his own power and his own ambitions, and she points out he's been lying to her since the very first moment that they met. And the Darkling is like, well, did you deserve my trust? Baghra whispered a few little accusations in your ear, and off you went, which is like, He does have a point there, if we're being quite honest, right? She did believe Bracca after one intense conversation, right? He accuses Alina of turning her back against Ravka, saying that the people who curse the Darkling's name but pray for the Sun Summoner, and yet it was Alina who was ready to abandon them, whereas the Darkling wants to give them power over their enemies and free them from the tyranny of the king. Alina says they're just exchanging one tyrant for another. The Darkling says, someone has to lead, Alina. Someone has to end this. Believe me, I wish there was another way. Alina considers that maybe he's doing all of this maybe for the right reasons, to actually save Ravka, but she knows better. She can see past this facade and into the greedy eyes of, this man who will never stop for more and more power. So this is where we get the infamous line where he turns to her and says, fine, he said with a weary shrug, make me your villain. And Ben Barnes does a fantastic job delivering this line. Incredible. There should have been an Emmy just for that line alone. All right, the Darkling approaches her to touch the collar, and Alina has to beg again for Mal's life. Alina does a pretty good job, honestly, of begging for his life. I'm not going to go into full detail there, but she begs for his life. She says that if he lets Mal go, if he shows mercy, she'll stay by his side forever, never fight him, do whatever he wants. But if he harms Mal, she'll never forgive him, and she will spend every moment of every day trying to end her own life, thus taking away her power from him. Very similar to Tangled, when Rapunzel is begging Mother Gothel for Eugene's life, right? Flynn Rider. Very, very similar, I'd say, overall. The Darkling is like, mercy. He tells Ivan that she can go see the tracker and say her goodbyes, because tomorrow in the Shadowfold, he will feed Mal to the Volcra. Alina shouts at him that is this your idea of mercy? And she calls him a murderer and a monster. But the Darkling is just like, I have far more practice with eternity, and just sort of dismisses her. So Ivan has her cloaked in a disguise, and they make their way over to the jails. And I thought it was worthy to point out that the jail is guarded by a First Army soldier, so non-Grisha. So when they see Ivan, they call him a bloodletter with disgust. And I think this is just important to show that since the Grisha face discrimination from all sides and even within their own army, and I feel like this is what convinces the Grisha, like Ivan, to go along with the Darkling's plans. They're tired of being treated poorly. They're tired of being, feared by everyone. Everyone kind of hates them. And so the Darkling is offering them more power in a way to be above everyone else. But anywho, Alina and Mal are reunited in the jail cell, and Mal soon realizes Alina is only here because soon enough, Mal will not be here any longer. But Mal doesn't regret not killing Alina. He says how he could kill his best friend, right? His childhood love of his life. The only one who's ever been there for him. And Alina tells Mal the things that the Darkling said about the two of them together, implying more than just kissing happened, but that it isn't true, and Mal assures her that it doesn't happen, right? She wants Mal to know, nothing fully really happened between them, but he's like, it doesn't matter, but Alina kind of doesn't really believe him either. He says, so maybe I don't believe it yet either, not completely, but it's the truth. He clutched my hands more tightly, holding them close to his heart. I don't care if you dance naked on the roof of the little palace with him. I love you, Alina. Even the part of you that loved him. Mal is like, do you blame me for all the mistakes I've made, all the girls he's actually been with, mind you? And assures her that all that matters is they found their way back to each other. So they spend the night together reminiscing about the orphanage. Anyakuya is still up here, right? And some of their happier memories together. And Alina recalls a time when she broke a ceramic blue cup and was trying to piece it back together when Mal returned from a few day hunting trip back to the orphanage. When she saw Mal and then she saw how he was running towards her, her heart just felt so full in the moment that he picked her up and spun her around, and the shard of the ceramic cup that she was holding just cut into her hand. But she didn't even care because Mal ran for her. He missed her just as much as she missed him. And I didn't mention this before, but throughout the book, whenever Alina was feeling a little bit nervous, she would always rub that scar that was on her hand. So that's where the scar came from. In the TV show, the scar was when she hurt herself to avoid passing the Grisha test. But in the book, that's kind of just all in her head for the most part. So again, having the visual of the scar makes not passing the Grisha test a little bit easier to understand. She just resisted really hard from the heart render. But here, the scar, again, she still has the scars, just from something different. Before either of them know it, the sun has risen, and Alina gives Mal one more kiss before Ivan escorts her away. So she's led back to her tent when Junior arrives to dress her for crossing the fold, though neither of them say a single word to each other the whole time. As she's led to the sand skiff, she can feel the tension in the air and how all the other Grisha are just staring at her. She knows that they probably assume that she's just nervous about crossing the fold, but really she just kind of feels numb in the moment about everything going on. So when her and the Darkling board the skiff, she realizes that they're ambassadors from Fjorda, Shuhan, and Kirch, as well as some of the king's envoy. And this is why they've waited a few days to enter the fold. The Darkling wanted an audience. So as they enter the fold together, Alina remembers the time when she dreamed of being by his side, to enter the Shadow Fold together, a chance to prove herself, to please the Darkling, and she just like cringes at that memory of knowing where that hope and dream has brought her now. So the Darkling orders the Inferni to burn some fire to attract the Volcra to the skiff. And then that invisible hand just like dips into her power. And again, just the light just explodes out of her control. So as the Volcra writhe in the light, she really looks at the Volcra now, seeing how the Volcra are the truth of him. These dysmorphic, gruesome creatures. The Darkling commands her power to make a path so the skiff moves ahead towards Novokribrisk. And as they get closer, Alina can see the village in the distance, the people waiting in the dry docks, waiting for the skiff's arrival. The skiff slows down and the Darkling gets ready to raise his hands. And with horror, Alina realizes what he's about to do, shouting at him that they're his own people. But with the clap of his hands, the Shadow Fold engulfs Novokribrisk and all of the people in it, right? So he just expanded the Shadow Fold into a town, into a village. And now all the people are running in terror. Screams of terror are filling, the darkness is engulfing them all. There's shrieks of the Volcra as they're attacking people because now they have all this new prey to hunt. Alina is desperately trying to, push her light out to save as many people as she can. But again, she has no power right now. And again, that invisible hand on her power just like lays firm. So the Darkling stops the spread of the fold, turning to all those ambassadors and with a clear message. Today, Novokribrisk. Tomorrow, it could be any of their homes. So even the king's envoy is like, what do you think you're doing, man? And the Darkling wastes no time, saying he'll gladly march the fold up to Osalta, right, to the capital of Ravka. He says that from now on, there is no Ravkans or Fjordans or Shuhan. It's simply those in the fold and those outside of the fold. And now they can have peace. But the Shuhan are quick to say it's peace on his terms. And the Fjordans agree that this cannot stand. This is wild beans. The Darkling says, peace on my terms, or your previous mountains and your saint-forsaken tundra will simply cease to exist. Again, he's just threatening everyone, being like, if you don't listen to me, I will just destroy all your little homes with the fold. And Alina knows that he means every single word of this. He is not joking when he says he will just basically destroy the world with the fold. And Alina looks around, and while some of the Grisha look a little unnerved, many do look kind of excited. After years of terror and being hunted and killed and discrimination, they finally feel like they have power and someone is sticking up for them. So as they're ready to leave, the Darkling has Ivan bring Mal forward, and without haste just has him pushed over the edge real quick and recalls Alina's light so that Mal is left in the darkness. All right, so as the Volcra are descending on Mal, Alina has his memory so vivid it's as if she's reliving it, and she's in the forest with the stag, and the snow is glistening all around them, and she can feel the plume of the stag's breath in the cold night. And this whole time she thought the stag was haunting her dreams to remind her of her failure in not saving him. But she realizes that she was wrong. The stag was showing me my strength, not just the price of mercy, but the power it bestowed. And mercy was something the Darkling would never understand. I had spared the stag's life. The power of that life belonged to me as surely as it belonged to the man who had taken it. I gasped as understanding flooded through me, and I felt that invisible grip falter. My power slid back into my hands. Once more, I stood in Bagura's hut, calling the light for the first time, feeling it rush toward me, taking possession of what was rightfully mine, that this is what I had been born for. I would never let anyone separate me from it again. So yes, that is right. The stag, again, was always meant for Alina from the very beginning, and through her mercy for the stag's life, that she rightfully had the power for the stag's power as well. So Alina explodes with light, driving off the Volcra from Mal, and the Darkling's confused at first, not understanding why he can no longer control her light. So he quickly calls for the guards just to seize her. And Alina, with that ancient heartbeat of the stag within her, she lifts her arm and slashes through the air, sending a searing blaze of light into the mast of the skiff, splitting it into two. So yes, that is right. She just performed the cut, one of the most advanced techniques a summoner can do. Since he can't use brute force, he decides to try and use his words to get Alina back to his side, assuring her that she's not a murderer. She wouldn't hurt all these innocent people on the sand skiff. And Alina's like, I think all those Ravkans in Novokribrisk that I just helped you slaughter would think otherwise, right? So she's like, perhaps maybe I do disagree on that. So Alina turns on the Grisha now, trying to get them to see reason. Do they really want this future of darkness and chaos? But no one moves, neither Grisha or the First Army. And she does realize this is partially from fear, right? Everyone's just kind of in shock and in fear at the moment. Fear of the situation, fear of the Darkling, fear of everything. But girl is fed up. She is like, you know what? I'm going to make my own choice now. So she chooses Mal, of course. So she hops over the edge of that scan script and she's hoping that he'll understand that she's leaving all these people behind. She gets to Mal, and the sounds of the slaughter behind her on the Sanskrit, as they're running away, she can just hear it. And Elena does think of them knowing that even if they didn't come to her aid, did they really deserve to die? And she knows that, again, they don't, but, the Darkling tries to reason with her again that she can't leave them all to die, that she once begged him for clemency. Is this her idea of mercy? And Elena thinks to herself, yes, the mercy the Darkling taught her. And honestly, we all know the Darkling's just kind of convinced her because he's desperate now, right? It's like she just spent 10 pages of my own notes trying to convince him not to do this. And now that, she has the upper hand, he's like, no, you're not a murderer. So anyway, as she reaches Mal, she turns back and sends another shattering slash of light through the air, splitting the sand skiff again in two. And Elena and Mal stumble further into the darkness as the raw screams and the vulgar shrieking kind of fill the air. So I just want to say we are almost there. I promise. I only have a few more pages of my notes left. My throat is dry. It is like I've been filming for hours at this point. So, all right, Elena and Mal do make it somewhere south of Novosibirsk, and while they're exhausted, they know they have to keep going because the Darkling is going to be after them pretty much immediately. They try to clean themselves up as much as they can in some dirty water. Elena can see the deep gashes that the Volker got into Mal. He continues to lead the way further to the coast, and indeed, they do make it to the true sea. And Elena and Mal have never seen water like this, right? So they're truly in awe, inspiring to see these ships docked in this expanse of water. As someone who grew up by the beach, I honestly can't even picture what it would be like to grow up not seeing an ocean, so to speak. So it must be quite shocking for the two of them to see this. What also helps is that Oskurvo is a crowded port, so it's a great place for them to lay low and to hide for a little bit. Elena gives Mal one of her golden hairpins to exchange for money, and he leaves to go get some clothes and food. I remember Elena still has that collar around her neck. So again, in the TV show, the collar absorbed into her body, but here in the books, the collar stays. So you can still see the physical collar. So again, pretty obvious if she's walking around with antlers on her collarbone. But Elena can't think of all the people she left behind. She does feel really bad about that. Again, the bastards for the other countries, the First Army soldiers who are just scared and frozen in fear. But by the time Mal gets back to her with some of the ugliest clothing in the world, Elena hasn't rested at all. And even if anything, has even more anxiety about the Darkling being on their trail. Mal tells Elena he bought the first clothes he could find, right? And Elena but says that he never wants to see Elena wearing black again. And he also gets her a scarf to hide the antlers. And Elena jokes what are they going to do when it becomes summertime? And Mal isn't bothered by this because he figures well, we'll get a way to get the antlers off you at some point. And Elena physically recoils at the thought of getting rid of the amplifier. And Mal is surprised at this, and Elena tries to hide her reaction that they need the amplifier. She needs the power if she's going to destroy the fold. But she can't deny herself that she likes the way it feels, that she feels like it belongs to her, and this power is now a part of her. And she doesn't really want to let that go. Mal is still skeptical, but Elena tries to reassure him that they'll get rid of the collar once they make use of it, which for now is good enough for Mal. So as they burn the black kefta Elena had worn, Mal kisses Elena's neck right above the collar, and as the tears came, he held her tight until there was nothing left but ashes. After. So like the before, sort of like the prologue, the after is basically like an epilogue and is told in third person omnipresent narration, almost as if someone is watching Elena and Mal from a distance. So Elena and Mal board a ship, eyes on the horizon for any black sails of the Darkling, and they listen to the gossip around them of what happened to Novosibirsk. Some people are saying it's the Darkling, some are blaming the Shuhan and Fjorda, some think it's the work of angry saints. More rumors spread that the apparat has disappeared, foreign troops are massing at the borders, and the First and Second Army are threatening civil war, that the Sun Summoner is dead. They waited to hear of any news of the Darkling, but no rumors about him just yet. And as the ship sets sail, Elena can't help but think that they are alone again, her and Mal. They are orphans again with no true home but each other and whatever life they can make together on the other side of the sea. So, all right, that is it, my friends. That is the first book of Shadow and Bone. We made it. What do you think? I would love to know. So let me know in the comments down below what you think of the first book of Shadow and Bone. This is my first time filming a video like this, so I apologize if it's a little rough with the audio or the video. I'm trying my best. I'm learning how to use the camera and everything. I was also wondering too, were you wondering, are there a certain set of characters that I did not talk about at all? No appearances whatsoever in this entire book. Because if you've only seen the TV show and didn't already know, the Six of Crows cast is not in the Shadow and Bone trilogy really at all. There's going to be one character from the Six of Crows cast who is going to make an appearance in the later books, but I'll say it's a very small role overall in the overall trilogy. Now, I do think this show did a really great job at integrating the Six of Crows storyline with the Shadow and Bone storyline as well, especially if you read the Shadow and Bone book first and then were wondering how they were going to incorporate them all in. Again, I think the show did it really well overall. So before I give some more thoughts and wrap up, I want to say first that I genuinely do love the Grishaverse so much. I love this book. That's why I just spent hours up here, right? Recording this, writing this, doing all this work. Because I love the Grishaverse. I think it's such a unique magic system. I really like it. It's a very interesting world. There's a lot of complex dynamics between characters and countries. And once we get further into the political drama, it's going to get really good, a lot better than what we even had here in the first book. But I do want to take a second here and discuss what I think is actually the biggest question to come out of this book and why I ultimately think the first book is not the strongest of the overall series, and why maybe Netflix producers chose to pair the first book up with the Six of Crows characters. So if we take a step back, on the very first page of this entire series, we learn that Alina and Mal are orphans because of the war that their home country has been a part of for hundreds of years. And again, we learn in the first chapter then that Alina and Mal have both joined the First Army to fight in these war efforts. So then based on the first few pages of the book, I feel like one would assume that the main conflict of the overall series would have to do something with this war that Ravka is at. But in truth, it kind of doesn't. In the first book, the war that Ravka is at is an underlying conflict for the entire series, and the war will run throughout the conflict of the other books as well. But I would argue that it's not the main conflict. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because arguably the main conflict of the first half of the book is Alina's inner conflict of finding herself, coming to herself of her terms, accepting herself, however you want to frame it, right? Of her accepting the fact that she's Grisha, whatever it may be. She had to come to terms that she was Grisha. She had to come to terms that she had to be independent and accept the life that's been thrown at her with Mal no longer in her life, right? Without that anchor, that she had to become a bit independent, I would say, in that sense. And while she has the pressure to come to these terms because of the war that Ravka is at, and that she's being told that she's the only one who can save Ravka, again, the actual war that Ravka is at isn't really focused on. Then we get to the second half of the book where the main conflict is preventing the Darkling from using the Shadowfold as a weapon of mass destruction. She runs from the Little Palace. Her and Mal go after the stag to gain his power so she can destroy the fold. They ultimately fail, but are still able to escape the Darkling and his greed for power. And again, here the Darkling wants to use the Shadowfold as a weapon against their enemies. And yet still, the war is not necessarily a focus of the second half of the book. So much so that if I asked someone who just read the first book and has not read any of the other books or anything, why is Ravka at war? Who is Ravka at war with? And what are they fighting over? Can we genuinely give an answer to that just based on this first book alone? And I think right there, that is kind of the crux of the problem of Shadow and Bone, that we have this huge underlying conflict of the book, but we, the reader, never fully understand why Ravka is at war. We are just told again and again that they've been at war for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that there's no end in sight to it. Now, again, there is that one line, if we throw it all the way back to the beginning of the book, that hints at what the war is about. Because it is said a few times who they're fighting. They're fighting Fjorda, who is to the north of them, and Shuhan is to the south of them. And then there is the one line where the Darkling says to Alina that Grisha are burned at the stake for being witches by Fjorda, and they're dissected by the Shuhan. And that, for the most part, is the only hint we get at why they are at war with their neighbors. Is that the Fjordans are hunting them, right? Because they think that the Grisha are witches, and Ravka welcomes Grisha into their ranks. And the Shuhan are doing experiments on Grisha. So just to say, I feel like it's just not fully clear, for being really honest. Are those the only two reasons why you're at war with these countries? Like, there is no other way you can come to a political agreement after hundreds of years, right? This is a conflict that's lasting hundreds and hundreds of years, that you've found no common ground to stop this war, I suppose. We also is not clear too if Fjorda and Shuhan are at war with each other, because it makes it sound like Ravka is just fighting Fjorda and Shuhan on their borders, but are they fighting with each other? And also, after hundreds of years, how is Ravka still fighting this war? Like, if you just think economically, like, how is that even happening, honestly? I just can't even fathom, like, a country being at an active war for hundreds of years, right? It's just unfathomable to a certain extent. So I'll say, too, this line also mentions that the Kirch sell Grisha as slaves, but they aren't technically at war with Kirch, so it's a little bit confusing, too, what the role of Kirch is in this, again, just according to the first book. In later books, we kind of get a little bit of a hint that Kirch is kind of like Switzerland, where they're sort of like trying to stay out of it. And in theory, Kirch has outlawed slaves, but some people still sell slaves on the black market type of thing. So perhaps that's why they're not at war with Kirch. But again, Still, I would say overall a little bit unclear. So yeah, so I feel like if we had a little bit more answers to the world building of like the overall world itself, not just like the magic system or like again the inner politics of Ravka, I feel like that would help just give a little bit more solidarity overall to the series. Because again, the war with Fiora and Shuhan are going to become major plot points in later books, and it is going to be extremely explored, especially once we get to the King of Scars duology. And it is going to get so good when we get there. It's like once we actually get to the war of like what is going on with Fiora and Shuhan, it's going to be very interesting. But within just the first book, we're kind of just missing that. And I feel like that's why the first book is just lacking a little bit. Again, that's not to say that I do not love this book, because I definitely do love this book and I definitely do love this overall series. And also, again, I don't just say this just to like be critical of Shadow and Bone either, because again, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, because I think an internal political conflict is very interesting and it is very complex, especially with then your external political conflict of the war too, like how the two are going to meld together. But again, it's just for the overall world building, I just feel like there's just some big holes for me. And I feel like the whole time I'm just sitting here being like, what is going on with this war? Anyway, again, I do like the book. I don't mean to be harshly critical on it here at the very end here, because obviously I did this whole video because I really like the Shadow and Bone series. The Grishaverse is one of my favorite fantasy worlds in a very general sense, and I'm excited to do Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising, so that will come soon. Stick around for that. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Let me know in the comments what you think of, you know, Shadow and Bone of the first book, why you think maybe the Shadow and Bone trilogy could not stand on its own for its own TV series or movie, why it was kind of paired with, again, a later future stronger plot and characters, if we're being quite honest. So I'm just laying that out there. Not to say I don't love them. Again, Alina, she's my girl. She's my favorite character of this book. Jenya is my favorite character of the overall Grishaverse, but of the first book is definitely Alina, right? Her emotional arc is really good in this book. Again, shout out to my best friend Shannon, who is the main reason why this video exists. I love you very much, Shannon. And thank you to anyone else who may be watching. This is definitely a very long video, so if you stuck around to the end, that's actually pretty wild. So thanks so much, and I will see you all real soon.